a
Yeah.
big clown,
And
and
a
the
clown.
grimace. They
Yeah.
they're off the chain. They are
Are
off the
they?
chain. Well, I
Are they
guess they
on
never
the
had a
chain?
chain.
I
Yeah,
was gonna say they're on their chain. This is
they
their
are on.
chain.
This is their way. It's really quite something, though. I must give them credit though, because one thing about Donald John Trump, he understands the level of decadence that we're living in and the idiocracy. He has his mind. Well, he's got a mind meld with the idiocracy. So this staged event yesterday with Vladimir Zelensky, it was chef's kiss. I'm there for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Little
I
Marco
just
sitting there looking like a garden gnome, hilarious.
I mean, the jokes write themselves, but unfortunately, the jokes on us. I mean, those of us in these borders, among these borders, because I'm just thinking about it geopolitically. There was a time, our parents' generation were hiding under desks because of this Red Scare and the Bay of Pigs, and it's like there's this Russia's bad, and we had all of these movies, telling us how bad Russia was, and now we literally are an annex or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. I mean,
How'd that happened?
what do we what do you think? What do we do?
I thought,
Yeah.
yeah,
Their
I
thoughts to
thought,
have.
yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because we've obviously not been here before, and at the same time, we've been exactly here before, and at the same time, we never left here. This is the clarity that we should have
Yeah.
about this moment. There's really nothing fundamentally different, you know.
Have
So
you been watching what's going on in Greece? I know you have.
yeah, but not. I haven't been paying much attention to it. Yeah, I must confess. But did y'all talk about it yesterday?
I was off. But I blacked out completely yesterday. I didn't
Really?
spend any money, and I wasn't on the air.
Oh, our sister Omalade is saying on Bell that we should just like withdraw all our participation. So you got a head start on it.
It was beautiful too. I must admit, I went for a
Yeah.
lovely walk. The sun was out.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about. Well, it's interesting because when you withdraw your labor, that's what happens, whether it be Greece or here in the US. When you withdraw your labor, I mean, Du Bois wrote that chapter in Black Reconstruction on the general strike. And he interpreted the Civil War in part, the collapse of the Confederacy, he attributed it partially to we withdrew our labor. You can't win a war if you don't have resources, and you don't have resources if you don't have labor. And once your labor says, oh, it's on. Okay, first thing we're gonna do is stop tilling these cotton fields. Now you're in trouble. Oh, wait, and the second thing we're gonna do is go get a gun. And the third thing we're gonna do is ram this Emancipation Proclamation down your throat until your neck break off. And so when we give Abraham Lincoln undue credit for free, Abraham Lincoln ain't free nobody. We freed ourselves, and it started with the general strike. So shout out to Greece. All the halted trains, all the halted ferries, all the grounded flight, the public service disrupted. And if you don't think it's coming here, you're not paying attention. Understand that the need to be on medication clown boss of the United States sent an email out last night. I was at the movies. I came out and he said,
What you go see? What you see?
oh, well, it was the Washington Black History Month Film Festival yesterday. So it was quite a lineup. Saw a lot of shorts. Shout out to the Duke Ellington School for the Arts. They performed at the beginning. Shout out to all the folks who put it together. This is a film festival that started in Atlanta about a decade and a half ago, and then it grew into DC, and it's somewhere else. So I had to pull up the information, but I'm trying to remember. There were several. The anchor text. There were two. One was on the Green Book, about a 40-minute documentary. This elder got a young brother from Philadelphia and another young sister, and they didn't go south, they went north. They went to New York to look at the different places that were in the Green Book. Victor Hugo Green and his
Yeah,
wife's
I
Green
got
Book.
I got it right there. See?
There it is. There it is right there over your shoulder. That's right, over your left shoulder to our right. Yes, the Green Book. And he actually had those books with him, the ones that some of the originals and some have been republished as they've begun to come out. By the way, if you're in the DMV, if you're in the area, you should, if you can get a chance, if you haven't, go down to the Martin Luther King Library today. Today is the last day for the major exhibit on the Green Book. that had its official opening in November. In fact, they asked me to moderate a panel discussing it at the opening, but I told them I couldn't because the panel was on November the 6th. And I said, when they asked me in October, I said, yeah, I'm not sure what November the 6th is going to be. So I think I probably need to keep that day flexible. And who knew? I guess we all did. But at any rate, it closes today. And one side is the national exhibit, which is about the Green Book everywhere. And that's what the film last night covered, as they talked about that. And then the other side of it takes up the whole lobby of the Martin Luther King Library, which is a beautiful, beautiful library and an expansive lobby. On the right side is the Green Book in DC. And I was talking with one of the curators on Thursday. She and I were talking about the collection that the DC side is built on. And it's about 30,000 photographs that haven't been processed for public research yet, that they drew from, that kind of captures not the portraiture like Addison Scurlock, the Scurlock brothers, who for decades, you want to get your high school picture taken, or you were a prominent person, you went to their studio and took it. But these photographs are candid photographs. So you see Joe Louis sitting at the Dunbar Hotel. You see Black folk dressed up on U Street coming in and out of the restaurants. I mean, and so it was powerful. So anyway, there was a documentary on the Green Book. There were 11 films total. There was a beautiful documentary on the Maya Angelou schools here in DC. James Foreman Jr., of course, his father, of course, the great civil rights, human rights liberation warrior, and James Foreman Jr., lawyer. Probably most people, if you know him at all, know him for his book Locking Up Our Own, where he's looking at the class tensions in Black communities and how that kind of didn't help when we had war declared on us in the 1970s and 80s, so-called war on drugs. But at any rate, Foreman is one of the moving spirits behind the Maya Angelou schools. So it talks about the schools that they developed here in DC, which came out of the detention center, the Oxon Hill, the infamous Oxon Hill in Maryland detention center, so-called school. The kids didn't even want to, there's nothing there but violence. So they transformed all of that. There was a documentary on 5 sisters called the Charleston Five. I'm not Charleston. What am I thinking? Because I've been in South Carolina so much. The Chattanooga Five. 5 Black women, mothers, grandmothers, who in 1980 were shot by the Ku Klux Klan. These random ass white boys riding through Chattanooga, shooting at people. None of them were killed. They shot them with birdshot. There's one sister who continues to this day in physical form. The other 4 are ancestors, but they sued the Klan. In fact, the name of the documentary is How to Sue the Klan. They were the ones who developed the legal strategy, along with a brother and sister from New York who came down to lead the case. They were the ones who designed the strategy that ended up being the playbook everybody else used. So when people talk about, they bankrupted the Klan, these were the 5 Black women. They shot these sisters. I'm just riding down the street, you know what I'm saying? And you hear their stories. They've been recorded. One elder was talking, and you just sit there and think, yeah, I'm ready. I'm absolutely ready for this criminal enterprise to die. It must be renegotiated, because the descendants of those crackers are now riding high. They are in control of the federal government now, and they've been emboldened. So, I mean, I wanted to see that. And then finally, there was a 2-hour documentary. By the way, this started at 5 p.m. and it went until the last movie came on at around 11. So we were there at the historic Lincoln Theater there on U Street. Beautiful thing. Shout out to Lamar Rucker, the good brother. Lamar Rucker was the kind of he was the master of ceremonies. He opened it up. Yes. Okay. Very interesting. I mean, shout out to his foundation, working with Black men. It was really a beautiful thing to be in that space with all these folks watching these movies. So by the end, I would say probably 20% of the people who were there at the beginning were left. And by the very end, around maybe about 8, 9 people. But I wanted to see, actually, everybody can see this one. This is the newest documentary on Paul Laurence Dunbar. It actually came out on PBS. It's just been released this year, 2025. So it's only a few months old. And it's Paul Laurence Dunbar, and you can look it up. I think it's called Beyond the Mask. It's very well done. Very well done. It's over 2 hours. a documentary that traces Dunbar from his parents, his mother, of course, who born into captivity, his father, who was born into captivity, but who escaped captivity, went through the Underground Railroad to Canada, then came back into the United States to join the 55th Massachusetts. By the way, there was a documentary on the Marines of Mumford Point and the Connecticut colored troops who went south to battle. It was all kind of just beautiful. These were shorts, but Paul Dunbar's father was remarkable. I mean, and his mother was remarkable. It starts with his parents and comes through his early years. Of course, he went to school with Wilbur and Orville Wright. He was very close to them. So it's very interesting because when we were there last year in June, and we'll be going back, of course, as we be out there in them Nubian streets navigating. And shout out to all the Nubians I saw last night. It just blows me away when I just see random folk. What I see, everybody, hey, I'm a Nubian. Wow. So who were there last summer, and we'll be back next summer. In fact, Baba Larry and Mama Labisi are planning now for the Martin Delaney trip, but we always go to Paul Dunbar's house. So that historic district that includes William Bing Davis's art gallery. Baba Bing was in the documentary as well. It's called the Wright Dunbar District. That's where the National Park Service Wright Dunbar place. It's named for Paul Laurence Dunbar and Wilbur and Orville Wright. So that was all in there. It was really something. But when I came out of the film festival and came out onto U Street, and of course, I had my baseball cap and hoodie and jacket on. So fortunately, any student who is now realizing, if you're a Howard University student, because I know some of them are here too, if you're realizing now that's who that was passing you as you were engaged in some of the most colorful contemporary cursing prose and poetry that I think I've experienced, just know that Daddy Carr heard you, and it's okay, because obviously you just living your best life. I was like, wow, all these Black kids. And then I crossed a couple of.
But they weren't at the film festival.
No, of
they
course
were
not.
Yeah, okay.
Of course they weren't. No, I mean, that's that. I mean, because it's not, those two things don't. This is why we're here, right? This is why we're here Saturday after Saturday after Saturday. That's why we do what we do, because we are taking away people's. Not want to say taking away excuses. What I would say is that we're making people aware, because I believe that had they been aware, some of them would have been there. Because it was from 5 until, it was advertised 5 to midnight. Like I said, the Dunbar film didn't go on until about 11. So it was about 1:30 when we got out of there. But they would have come. I have no doubt. People had to be exposed. Just like I'll talk about a little bit later, the For Gaza's Children, for the Children of Gaza book event we had at Howard, Sankofa hosted, and Hakeem Al-Budi, Keith Gilliard, Martin Lamont Hill, myself, we were on a panel discussing the book that's just come out, Third World Press. And there's a book on Sudan right away. So everybody who is saying, what about Sudan? What about Congo? That book's on the way. Even as we see that this ceasefire is about to end, because we know Bibi Netanyahu didn't want no ceasefire. They just needed to give Trump a chit and reinforce. So they're getting ready to start killing hardcore again very soon. Hopefully not, but just so you know. But as we were coming out of that event, Sunday night, there were all these students coming to the student center dressed to the nines, ball gowns. They had these little masks. You had the French wear these little masquerade masks, and the dudes had on the tuxedos and the shiny suits. I'm like, where y'all going? We're going to the masquerade ball. What? Where is that? That's here, upstairs in the ballroom. What? And I'm thinking, not now one of y'all knew about this event around the corner with several of the most important publishers of the 20th century. Of course, Paul Coates was there. And I saw Paul again. We'll talk about that in a minute. On Wednesday night with Julius Garvey, Dr. Garvey, they all came to the Howard Law School. But the students didn't know. My students knew because I told them in class. And so many of them were there, and they were over to law school too. But these young people who didn't know, they were dressed going to the revelry. I don't blame them, because we don't do as good a job as we should at Howard or anywhere else, for that matter, of communicating with young people. So I saw them all. They were all out there on U Street. But as I walked closer to Georgia Avenue to get ready to head back, to the house, segregation just, I knew it was segregated. We know we live in a segregated society. All the black kids coming out of the Lincoln, which is across the alley from Ben's Chili Bowl. So, the famous Ben's Chili Bowl, coming up past Lee Flower Shop, the Masonic Lodge, Prince Hall and the Order of Eastern Star, all that. You see black kids. And you see a little bit of mingling with some white kids, which you would never see white kids on U Street when I started working at Howard in 2000. And then it began real estate violence, as Lamont King calls it. And then gentrification, you start seeing them coming. By the time I got near Georgia Avenue, it was all white kids. And they going in their club. They going in their part. I mean, it was all white kids in the dress that I would expect, that I saw at Ohio State when I was there, that I saw at Temple when I was there. I'm talking about no coats. Now it's getting towards spring. I'm glad it's not cold, but it's still cold. I'm talking about no coats. I'm talking about, okay, I've seen this before, but I ain't never seen it on U Street. I heard about it on U Street. You know what I'm saying? But it was, what I hadn't seen before was all black, little mingling, all white. Just boom, almost like you had a line. So we know we live in a segregated society, and that's not news to anybody.
Purposefully, willfully.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. 75%. NBC did a poll. I never forget 2014, because it was a rallying cry. It was a revelation for me, to think that 3/4 of white folks self-segregate in this country. So not only do they not know us, but judge everything about us, and then have the audacity to put out movies and TV shows based on their very limited understanding of who we are. But they self-segregate. They run to places where they don't have to be around us unless we're in servant-like positions, taking care of their mamas or their children.
Wow.
3/4. That was stunning to me. And, covering education in New York, on the editorial board, I did a whole series on the segregation in the schools in New York, one of the most diverse cities in our country, one of the most diverse places, have schools that are 99% white. How is that possible? How?
Well, I mean, schools follow residents, and when you can't,
it's willful, though, is my point. All of this talk of liberal, I'm not racist. I don't have a racist bone in my body, whatever that looks like. Your racism is in your choice to, I remember having this conversation with Reed Galen, who is one of the founders of Project Lincoln, who was on the Karen Hunter show for a number of years when I was doing the, Party of Lincoln. Then all of a sudden I look up and I was like, no invitation, and no black people in this thing that you sat on my show and listened to me ask. I remember asking him, you live in Utah. Your kids go to school with black people? How many? It's like, what, 1-2% black people? You made a choice to move to Utah, right? You made a choice to live in a homogenous space, but yet you want to have a more perfect union. How does that happen if you willfully don't expose yourself? So we, beyond knowing what it is, we have to also understand this is very, very purposeful. So we have to be very, very purposeful. Very, very purposeful.
So help us with that problem. When you say purposeful, what do you envision in terms of what we should be doing? When you say purposeful,
I love that you started with compared to what, because sitting with you for these last 4+ almost 5 years now, I am very clear that we don't know enough about even our experience to be able to know that we don't need, to your point, we're not rampant segregationists, right? We're not somebody that's willfully, I don't want you here. We would never have a colors only section and exclude no whites allowed. We would never do that, right? Because it's not just in our DNA. But I think, which is why I was rallying for yesterday so much, because once you realize your power, to your point, the war ended because black people made a decision to walk off plantations and pick up guns.
Yes.
Civil War.
Yes.
This current construct that we're in will end when the labor force, and whether we're talking about postal workers, the people that deliver your stuff, your longshore people, every facet, people to take care of people's children, people who take care of people's elderly, most of the people are melanated.
Yes.
I'm looking at Greek. The Greeks are in the streets. They're not doing a damn thing.
Greeks are in the streets.
Greeks are in the streets.
The Greeks are in the streets.
we don't need to be in these streets right now, because we don't need to be cannon fodder because they're waiting for us to be in the streets. We stay our asses in the house and away from the streets, because they want us in the streets so they can do what they do.
Yes.
But I think once we realized the way we did after Reconstruction, after they ended Reconstruction, we leaned in, right? I had a whole conversation this week about the People's Grocery Store, which is ironically the way we started narrative. That's how we started.
One. That's right.
Yeah.
Number one.
So, but that was to me a model. You know, Black folk, just like, okay, we're gonna have an amazing grocery store, and everybody knew that it was good, to the point that the folk that had grocery stores before, who were probably not selling the freshest fruit, probably not treating people with dignity and respect, people stopped going to their grocery store because there was an option across the street of people who actually were giving them everything. And even folk without melanin were going to that people's grocery store. And instead of like raising the bar, the person decided to go and raise Cain, raise hell, and lynch and destroy the competition. Now we know that that's going to be a tactic. So you build into whatever you build self-defense.
You know, it's interesting because that's often, Dr. King used to say that as well, that, you know, we can't win a fight, a firefight. He would say that, you know, part of nonviolence, while it was a way of life for him, tactically, it didn't make sense to engage in a fight. I part company with Dr. King, not philosophically, but on the historical record, because we have never not handed out ass whippings. So the idea that somehow they've got superior military force is true in a conceptual sense, but it has never been tested. When it has come time to confront power, there have been moments of slaughter, but those moments have never been one-sided completely. Whether you're talking about Cruikshank, the Cruikshank case, and what happened to Colfax massacre, and which is why I don't call them massacres. I don't call Tulsa a massacre. I don't call Colfax a massacre.
What do you call it?
Well, I call them race wars. I call them what they were. They were race wars. In other words,
well, race war, to be a race war, because I feel like we are minding our Black happy business and have to defend ourselves.
It's true.
A war to me is like, you declare war, okay, now we, you know, it's maybe co-equal.
Oh, that's a good
sides. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're always, you know, just,
yes,
you know, we don't have the numbers. We just minding our Black happy business, being excellent. Here y'all come. So,
well,
you know,
this is where, but this is where we get. See, this is the thing. I think we don't want to fight. We don't want to fight
some
because
of us do want to fight. Let's not say that. Some people do want to fight.
Well,
but
this is what I'm saying. When I say we don't want to fight, I mean we are attempting to be human in the world, and we don't want to concede that part of our humanity that is natural, because people who have been oriented, let's just start with this. We're all fundamentally the same. We are human beings. We're biologically the same. Cats and dogs can't have babies. Human beings from different quote unquote races can. The species is the same. We got the same equipment generally. You know, adaptation to whatever physical environment over the millennia notwithstanding. That having been said, it's the culture, it's the acculturation that creates the distinctions. So everybody has the capacity to be peaceful. But if you come up in cultures that, for whatever reasons, we've talked about this many times, resource scarcity, you know, being probably the fundamental reason, and I don't want to sound like an environmental determinist, but that's, you know, coming down to it engenders a sense of suspicion, distrust, and then selfishness. All those elements that we all have begin to be the center of the cultures. Now, African people,
I want to put up a church finger, because even as we talk about the scarcity of resources, you know, the indigenous people, when resources became scarce, they moved to places where resources were not as scarce. Absolutely. They followed the buffalo. You know, they didn't sit in the scarcity, and you know, they didn't sit there and then look around. Let me go steal. No, they followed nature. Absolutely. You know, and so fundamentally, I don't know if I agree that we are all the same, because even the folk that come out of scarcity had a choice, but they chose to take as opposed to move. And
we're not. I don't think we're having this difference here. This is where, and this is why I say I'm glad that we're having this conversation, because it's also modeling the standard that we have to set for ourselves in these conversations, as Marie Kelsey would say, with the whole ultimate objective being to agree, because unity is the only thing that's going to allow us to survive and thrive.
Period.
I think that everybody moves. Migration is the central theme in human history. What happens, however, is that the geography will determine the options you have as you move. So, for example, check out the joke, and and again, this is, let me just put underscore this for the infinitieth time. This is why you can turn off virtually everything on YouTube and all the talking heads and TikTok and all that, because the study is not there to undergird the statements that are made. Check out the joke in all of his work, and particularly that last book, Civilization or Barbarism, that he didn't live to publish. They put his notes together in his unfinished manuscript, but it still resonates. When you start, looking at what, and Sheikh Job's not alone. I'm using Sheikh the joke because he's African, he's part of the African world, and he has been one of the framing thinkers of the 20th century. Joke talks about scarcity in the context of migration like this. He says, when you move, but your options are limited by your geography, then there's no place you can go which will ultimately allow you to do what you're saying. The indigenous people, you got the Rockies in the West, you got the Smoky Mountains, you got some mountain ranges, but generally speaking, the Great Plains in particular, even what we call now Southeast United States, or even up and down the Eastern Seaboard, wherever you move across this continent, between the more temperate climate and the lack of obstructions, you can move until you find a place where you can spread out. You can't do that in Western Eurasia. Even as they migrated, there's no place that's going to you're going to get relief from the fact that it's only warm 3 or 4 months out the year. You can't, so the scarcity is going to fight. In Africa, and Joe makes this point, there are no large mountain ranges. You can literally walk from Egypt all the way to the Atlantic Ocean if an animal don't eat you up. The Sahel doesn't, and the Sahara wasn't there initially. So when you have conflict, human conflict, you could just move. So when you think of the nomadic culture,
the Eskimos,
mm-hmm.
It's cold a lot there,
yes.
right? And dark a lot there. Somehow they figured out whale blubber and igloos.
Yes.
They figured some stuff. I'm saying something right now. I'm saying that while you're correct, there's still a level of creativity and figuring some stuff out. I even think about the folk that moved into what they call Israel, which I think you're going to talk a little bit about Gaza today, which was desert. And there was eucalyptus and other kind of plants that were planted that created now lushness, right? There was an intention of what do we do with the desert to make it habitable? People, we figure stuff out just the way Onesimus figured out how to vaccinate for smallpox, an enslaved person. I'm saying that what we're seeing is a lack of creativity and a laziness. And the worst thing in the world is for the lack of creative person, lazy person to be in control, because that's when human beings get stunted. When the person with no creativity and who's also lazy is in control. And that's where America is right now. The ideals of America are rooted and bonded in this lazy, uncreative, using other people's ingenuity and claiming it as your own when you don't even know the source of it, and the arrogance that comes with that, Dr. Carr, the arrogance that comes with that is why we're here right now. And this has to be the fight. When you put compared to what I said, okay, yeah, and it's not about superior versus inferior. This is about, are you really all that you say you are? And if you're not, it's okay. You can become it, because people have become things over time when they shook the yoke of this narrative, this lie. And I just want us to be in truth. This is the reality. We have people who claim that they founded things, whether it's Edison or Musk, when they didn't. They didn't find this country. It was here. But the myth has created this S on the chest folk that walk around with this confidence that they shouldn't have. when they haven't been able to do anything. If you couldn't get out of trench mouth potato famines, when you came here and were eating yourselves because you couldn't survive but for the help of the people that you then killed.
Shout out to the Pilgrims.
When you brought Africans here to till the land and then wouldn't listen to them, beat them until your land turned to dust, tobacco farmers, because you didn't know anything about farming, but you had the audacity and the arrogance. I feel like this is the time for us to, those of us who not, and I think we've second guessed ourselves for 400 years because we've been told we're lazy and we're dumb and we're this, we're that, you don't do anything. And then we become the thing, the self-fulfilling prophecy, which is why I'm pristine about language. I don't let people talk about themselves or us, not publicly. You had those conversations with your therapist, but
so how far do we take it? I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I'm glad, like you said, I'm glad we're having this conversation. You, like you say, I think one way to narrate it is that we have been for 400 years we have endured this, and one way to narrate that is that there's been this unbroken suffering, this kind of social structure narrative. And when we, again, which is why we had to develop an Africana studies framework, because we can't even fit our experiences into these alien, and I'm using that word alien, as you say, very deliberately, because it is an alien framework, because it's anti-African, it's anti-human framework. In a governance, from a governance lens, we've never completely lost our ways of knowing, our cultural meaning making, our movement and memory. And it's fed a kind of set of governance formations that, while it didn't have full control of the larger social structures, the larger apparatus, it did sustain us. So we are at another moment, and I agree with you wholeheartedly that this moment of confrontation requires realizing that this confrontation was inevitable, meaning that over those 400 years, enduring and survival became our primary objective, but not survival at the cost of losing our full humanity, which includes those deliberate acts of self-defense. And which is why, again, I was listening last week to you and Dr. Kelly Carter Jackson, when she says, Black people never wanted revenge. No, Kelly, that's absolutely untrue, and it's historically inaccurate. We reveled in payback. And so for you to narrate, I understand what your editor in the university press has got to tone that down. So I'm saying, but at some point, you're going to have to recognize that you can't make peace with this system. I don't care whether you're a university professor, I mean, but that's why I ask you, how far are we go? Because if this is it, okay,
this is it. Or this is it, or we go right back. We can't tippy pause into this. And this is
that's what a lot of people want to do.
Yeah, no, this is not a tippy pause moment. This is why, I was watching a video coming in today, and it's a young brother. He was, saying the right things and then peppering the N-word in because, again, laziness is the default of this country. And why are we modeling that? It's like, can you find a better word to describe other people? Eric Adams, you want to talk about Negroes? Like, what? And why do we accept that?
Poor Eric Adams. Eric Adams got caught up in a governance/social structure moment. Everybody in the governance formation who speaks Ebonics knows what he was saying, but they act like they don't when you go into social structure. What do you mean by Negroes? You know what? You look here. You're one of them Negroes. You understand? I mean, but sadly, he caught.
But he was not smart enough to even handle fees because it was ignorance that allowed him to even use and sit up there, and the arrogance and all of the things that I'm just talking about. We have to stop modeling mediocrity. And we have to stop modeling the system that brought us here because it is inferior. The system is inferior to our existence as human beings, all of us. So why are we modeling it? It's not the perfect system. It's a system that will turn your soil to sand.
Yeah.
That's the system that we're in. I want my soil to produce food, and I want my seeds to reproduce. How about that? We're the system where people, I want my seeds to reproduce, don't you?
Yeah, but I mean, that's going to mean we're going to have to stand between those who want to exploit us, because that's the cultural anchor, and the rest of humanity. So we want our seeds to reproduce. We're going to have to stop buying them from corporations that make sure they design seeds that don't reproduce, so you can keep coming back and buying the seeds, meaning we can't avoid the conflict. It's going to be
and move away from the farmers that have sold their sold it.
Absolutely.
Because those seeds, the air carries the germination of that. We have work to do. But the work starts here, which is why I'm so excited to be in this space with you. I'm so grateful to God that I met you. You have, I already was imbued with this kind of fierceness, but now it's coupled with actual knowledge of self that, while I had it, is now very, very clear, is blooming in a way that I'm very grateful.
And I'm grateful for you too, because I bloom as well. Like, this conversation is modeling what it is. This is the model, and I'm grateful that you not only require that of all of us in the spaces, that you require in all the spaces you are. I mean, I can't tell you how restorative it is for me as just me as a person in the world, to be able to listen, to be in dialogue. Yesterday we were on the Mountain Nine. A brother called in to Sirius from South Carolina, and he talked about DEI, and he talked about how white companies in South Carolina that he works with, he has seen this, take their companies, and the husband owner will put the company in the name of the wife in order to qualify for the DEI stuff, and they continue with their white supremacist move. And so he was explaining that, and then he got into, and then, why we always talking about Gaza, we're not talking about Congo or Sudan, which of course we are, but we're going to do more of that. Sister Carr earlier in the week, now, because we in Joe Madison's studio, we have to talk about Sudan, even if for no other reason than we do that.
And that man went over there and freed people.
It's no question about it. So we have to do that, even as we do it, but we need to do more of it. So we had this week, I started at the top of the hour with an update, and we're going to kind of continue to do that, just so that people, not a long thing, but just enough. But anyway, as he was talking, some of the things he was saying trended toward that kind of blackface nativism that we see with the descendants of slaves, the American descendants of slaves movement. But it wasn't coming from a place of xenophobia or nativism. It was coming from his direct experience there in South Carolina, battling these white folks. And we're going to talk about South Carolina too a little bit more in later on. And so, but in that dialogue, with that sentiment that we're basically getting to try to get to a point of consensus and agreement and unity, what began to emerge was this kind of layered, important conversation that begins with listening to each other. And so there wasn't any conflict. It was just a minute to open up and say, so can we do both? Can we do all those things? He said, yeah, of course we can. And so we start, okay. And so I'm grateful to you, because that capacity to require us to be better, partnered with that deep generosity, that deep commitment to community, that is the way we get free, because we all have that capacity. And so even as we're talking now, as you're talking, I'm listening, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, when did the indigenous people get to cross the Bering Strait? They haven't been there long enough to adapt to the place where, because otherwise they look different. And then I'm thinking, okay, but that's a factor, but that isn't the controlling factor. And I thought, okay, in terms of time signatures, it's just so a lot of adaptive culture, in terms of how cultures take deep root, takes place over millennia, not centuries.
Right.
So, between African people, we're the ones who migrated into Western Eurasia. We migrated all over the world, but we got caught up there between the ice ages, the Verm ice ages. So you're talking about maybe 10,000 year period between the ice ages, and those cultures that we call European are very recent in human existence. But what happened now is that the acceleration of human contact that took place over the last 500 years, in principle, part because of the theft of labor of millions of people from one region by these people who had adapted and created these cultures of selfishness and scarcity and exploitation, has kind of flattened our ability to see things across time. And I'm saying that we wouldn't even be talking about this right now if we weren't in dialogue, because as you're listening to me and I'm listening to you, and all these folks are here in narrative and in the Nubia side and in the YouTube side, in the Mbangi. I'm again trying to repurpose language, not the chat. I mean, people aren't just talking, they're listening. So the dialogue, this is opening up and creating that standard that says we can't stay mired in mediocrity, because what you end up with is what we're seeing today.
And I just want to last thing, and I'm gonna pop out. I don't believe that I don't believe that any human being, because again, this melanin is what it is, whether you have a lot or you have very little. I think all of us want basically the same things. And what we're seeing play out in real time, even with our quote unquote leadership in this country, is a lack of love. Like, these two men have never seemed to have been loved, right? And watching you the other Monday night when you were in South Carolina and people popping in to make sure you were okay, you know, and unprovoked, but just to know, like, I want to make sure Dr. Carr is okay. We were all sitting there, holding our breaths. We all looking. I don't know if we could jump through the screen just in case, but there was a connection that we have to one another that I think people want. I think people crave that. And you said something really powerful that is sat with me, that we're the grandparents of the world.
No question.
But the grandparents
yes,
placed in a subservient position. And there are people right now who treat their grandparents like trash.
No
who
question.
Don't respect. This is the country that we're in. But a grandparent, you know, it's time for us to take our rightful place. And I feel very strongly about that. Like, we have to lead the next iteration of what humanity is going to look like, and center it in community and show what it looks. And you come or you don't. But if you come with bad intent, you're about to find out. That has to be the edict, right?
That's right.
And that's what I'm talking about, self-defense. We over here, we got seeds that reproduce. People, children are learning. We love each other. We're going to look out for each other. We're going to show up for each other. If you come in with some nonsense, you're going to find out. But you could come in if you bring us something. Bring your germinating seed. You know, like we're not. There's no sign saying you can't come.
Right. Well, and now the question becomes: should we start putting some of those signs up?
No, because that's not who we are. If we're going to really create the world we want to live in, if we're really going to create the world we want to live in, and I'm not a wild integrationist, whatever that means, I want to be with people who like to be, who know how to be with people. And you also said something during one of our 260 classes, that the way the indigenous people treated people who were acting out was banishment. And it's a very,
we separate, yeah.
And it's work. Like, you know, we're on YouTube right now. Good morning to y'all on YouTube. You know, I put clips up of my show, little clips of my show. And every time, I always know who doesn't listen to the show, who's in the comments. I always know. So I give you a chance. I'm going to challenge you when you come in. Oh, you just want to echo chamber? No, but you got to learn how to communicate with respect. You can disagree. You can have a different opinion, but you're not going to come in calling people out of their names. You're not going to come in with the definitive comment. You don't even know what the whole story is, right? So I have rules of engagement, and I'm like, I give you like not 3 strikes. I give you 2 strikes to see if you can do the back and forth without being disrespectful. And then I'll block you, because I'm not on YouTube for the engagement and the clicks and the likes and the audience. I don't care about the audience. I care about the community. So either you can be in community or you can't, and then you don't get an opportunity to be with us. That's how I am. You're a little different than I am. People need to know that too. Dr. Carr is different. I'm zero tolerant. You know, once you show me but you taught me that. You don't get to be in community if you don't know how to be in community. Go figure it out. Go get a therapist. Go sit. Go learn. Sit on the sidelines. Be quiet. But you can't come in, because to me, you know, it's like a fly in the ointment. You know, it only takes a little bit of yeast to make this thing. So I'm like, we ain't strong enough right now to allow for there to be a lot of the conflict coming in until we get stronger. But I think that that's the way forward. You know, banishment of people who can't, because we have something good over here, and I'm very okay with it. Whether it's a handful, I'm okay with the handful. The handful is about building what needs to happen, and we'll do that because every distraction takes us away from what we need to do, which is why I'm in these comments now. And I hate that I even have to monitor these comments and wait for somebody to pop
You
in,
talking
but
about
I'm quick on the banishment.
you talking about on the YouTube side?
Yeah. I'm quick. I'm
Yeah.
quick with that.
I appreciate that, and I think people know if folk have been in community with us for this nearly 5 years, they know that our fundamental grounding is the absolute same, and that our distinctions are important, and that they also lead to expanding rather than contracting. I think
Correct.
what you're raising is a very, very important point. We have this conversation all the time when we meet for our regular Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations um, meetings, our board meetings. And I'll share this because it both illustrates the point you're making and also gives a peek into the conversations that Black nationalist organizations have been having for a century. Jacob Carruthers used to always say, everybody in the world is a member of ASCAC. His generosity was, if you're an African person, we want you. My attitude is very different. My attitude is that we cannot seek a expansive definition of this formation at the risk of having it miss its essential mission. And at this, so here's the balance. This is where the balance comes in. I think, and I guess for me, one of the case studies I think is important in this is the organization US, Malana Karinga, and us very small in terms of membership, but the influence is remarkable. There's no Kwanzaa without that formation, but everybody can't join. No, us is a small, but by us it means all of us. And I'm saying, so here's where I think, in without going through, because again we got 260 these conversations. If folks want to get into this, you can see us having, and this is why I say the time factor is important, because if you look back over these conversations, you can see these themes emerging. And this is where I think, as you're talking, I'm listening, I'm thinking this is where the rubber meets the road, and we have this challenge at this point. My balancing means that Nubia, when we're here on office hours on Monday nights and we're having conversation and folks are in the Mbangi, and I'm trying to read through some parts of the Mbangi and respond in real time, even as now I have the Nubia Mbangi up and the YouTube Mbangi, and somebody in the YouTube Mbangi, I did catch a glimpse and say, ADOS is not xenophobic. It is absolutely xenophobic. It is, and by that I mean it is not totally xenophobic. First of all, it's not a thing. It's a concept. It's some letters. But it's a stalking horse. There are some clear agents of white nationalism who are being funded and undergirded, which is why I had to laugh when Lamont texted me last weekend saying, I'm going to this ADOS event. Do you want to see, can we get Yvette Carnell on? And I texted him back like, no. But if you want to invite her on, I'll have a conversation with her. If you're ready for that, but you should probably now, when we had this conversation, you should be quiet for about 10 minutes because I got to do some work. So you can't jump in with one of them questions and no. So I mean, but no, I don't even want that chaos. But that having been said, that having been said though, there are elements, and that brother from South Carolina who called yesterday on Sirius is an example. The idea that we have been harmed and that there should be something is important. And that's where, when you combine that with the ignorance, you get weaponized ignorance.
But even that, we don't disagree, because that's, again, we agree to agree on everything, really.
Yeah.
But I've made a conscious decision to not, just like I'm making a conscious decision to not center whiteness, just like we're compared to what? I'm saying we have something good over here. While we don't have it all figured out, the intent is very real. The food is good. We are growing and building. And I estimate that people will see what's going on and want to know more.
Absolutely.
So
But how do the people see it though? How do people get to catch the
we're
hint?
everywhere. We're not hiding.
And that's all I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. The
Okay.
YouTube stuff is so that people can
Right.
see. And
No, and
then
we're
yeah,
here. I mean,
yeah.
I'm like, okay, that's what you want to do, but I'm gonna be in these comments.
That's
As
what I
soon
was saying.
as I see somebody act out, you can't control that. I'm over here. I'm like, click, ban, goodbye.
And that's a distinction. I would let everybody talk. And
Yeah.
you say no, because to me, and this is where the time factor comes in. Time is so precious that time it takes you to get in there, especially when people say, let me set off a chaos bomb on purpose so that we can't have this conversation because you look, no, y'all talk about what y'all talk about, because there's people in
because
there.
then everybody then joins in
I get you.
to pay attention to the child in the room.
No,
As
I
opposed to
understand.
moving the child in the room, and then we can focus on you. So let's do that.
No, I understand. I do understand. I do. And you know, it's interesting. I saw I saw a student last night, one of my students, who was selling popcorn at the theater, at the Lincoln Theater. Because, you know, I've been in there. I got there about 6. So I've been there from 6, and this was like around 8:30 or 9. So I said, I'm going to get some popcorn. And I went up in this beautiful old theater. And they had a little corner where they selling popcorn. And Dr. Carr, what's going on? What you doing? You working down here? Yeah. And she said, I had been doing some substitute teaching to make some money, but then I stopped that, and now I'm just working down here. And this is cool. She said, I don't know how you do it. Do what, dear? I don't know how you are in the classroom with us all the time. Because I was in that high school doing some subbing, and I was like, wow. And I thought about that because, again, I had just seen the Maya Angelou documentary, the short on the Maya Angelou schools. And one of the things James Foreman Jr. said that we are told, he said, people tell us all the time, you're wasting your time. You can't reach those children. It's sad what happened in their lives, and at risk and violence and crime in the home and the community, but they can't be saved. You can't bring them to a level where they can tap into their God-given gifts and live the kind of life that you imagine that everyone would want to live. You can't do it. You're wasting your time. And he said, but for years, we are demonstrating the exact opposite at these schools. And there are many schools like this. I'm mentioning Maya Angelou because I just saw the documentary again, and I know the Maya Angelou schools. In fact, I've worked with people at the Maya Angelou schools, and, you know, I've been on many of these various kinds of campuses around the country. I'm not talking about the bird's eye view critiques of charters. In fact, Diane Ravitch, let me see, in the most recent New York Review of Books, has an excellent essay called "The Racist Roots." Well, no, it's not called. It's called "Selling Out Our Public Schools." It's a review of a book that just came out called "The Privateers: How Billionaires Created a Culture War and Sold School Vouchers." And it sent me to the bookstore to get that book. This is a book by Josh Cowan. Let me go to page 32 for a moment. I'm gonna tie this together in a minute. Here we are. It's called "Selling Out Our Public Schools." And you see here, these are 3 of the people here: Miss Minnie Jean Brown, Thelma Mothershed, and Melba Patillo, 3 of the Little Rock Nine with Daisy Bates. You see Daisy Bates, they were her. By the way, Miss Minnie Jean Brown, Nubian. She probably in here right now. First time I got a chance to sit with Minnie Jean Brown, actually over at the Howard Law School last summer. As I told y'all, remember, Miss Minnie Jean, I love you. Miss Minnie Jean said, you are a man after my own heart. I said, you are a woman after mine, because you face down the straight devilish movement in this country and live to tell this tale. So at any rate, she starts this because what Diane Ravitch, if y'all know anything about educational historians, and you know, Diane Ravitch was on the other side for a long time, and then she came around a little bit, but actually a lot. But the point she's raising here is that, of course, as we know, the whole voucher movement and the charter school movement and all those kind of taking public dollars and putting them into these places that aren't regulated in the same way came because in the wake of Brown versus Board of Education, as we've talked about many times, if you go through our compendium and search for this, you will find many references, including whole classes where we talked about this, including all the footnotes and books on the fact that these segregation academies were created. And it says, in fact, she's tying it to Milton Friedman, who says if black parents wanted their children to attend a segregated black school, Friedman said, or if white parents wanted their children to attend a segregated white school, or if parents wanted their children to attend an integrated school, all should be equally free to do so. It sounds great in theory, Friedman, you clown. Milton Friedman, clown. Get some clown makeup on, clown. A pure capitalist. I mean, he's extolled for that. Whether you're talking about Friedman's economic theories, which are ruling the day today, you look at Elon Musk and them, or John Maynard Keynes, Keynesian economics, so to speak, putting a floor in part under things like the New Deal, but all of them white nationalists, okay? Because what they are missing is the cultural component. What they're missing is the cultural arrogance. What they are missing is the centering of Western genealogies, which is why Africana studies is the only field of study in the formal academic sense, and now that we've jailbroken the university and returned it to where it should be, which is the community, the only study area that, well, by being grounded in our intellectual genealogies, reveal that all the others are white studies. They're not white studies, of course they are. Who do you say are their founders? Who do you say are the genealogies of thinking that come down through the years to where we are? And how do you characterize when we enter these fields? First one, do this. We're contributing. We're adding. Anytime you start by adding to something and not starting with yourself at the beginning, you are revealing that that thing itself is not built for you. If you want to impress me in the humanities and the social sciences, and I know you don't, and I'm just talking to the handful of academics who come in here so that they can kind of refresh their own memory or learn about new sources. I'm talking to you now, specifically to you, and then we're going to continue in what we were talking about. Unless you're going to start at the beginning of your field of study with yourself, you are doing white studies, my friend. I don't care how much you talk about diaspora history. I don't care how much you talk about Black formations in the humanities or social sciences. If you are not starting your genealogy with African people, not 50 years ago in your academic exercise, not 100 years ago or 200 years ago, not even by glorifying the folk and saying we have things to contribute to. No, I'm saying going back to the origin of humanity. If you're not starting your genealogy there, you are doing white studies. Now, back to what I was saying. Dan Ravitch makes the point that these battles over education and giving public dollars to private entities started in the United States in the wake of Brown versus Board of Education, so they could steal your tax dollars and give them to their schools that were beyond your ability to attend, the white academies. Now, what she doesn't do, and I respect that she can't do it, because that too would reveal that she, and when I say she's a white nationalist too, she gonna start her genealogy with Plato and Aristotle and all them people. What she doesn't do is say that that is how the model started from its inception. What she doesn't do, because she can't do as well, is say that the renegotiation of the terms of all these social structure arrangements would require uprooting the genealogy of education. You can't start with the Greeks and then come through the Romans and then come through Western Eurasia and then battle it down through to the expansion of Western Eurasia and settler colonialism. You can't then continue with the establishment of various outposts of settler colonialism that form their own separate formations, so that by the time you've come down through the Greeks and the Romans, and then you start talking about the birth of the university in the 11th to 12th century, and then you start talking about the boats coming over across the Atlantic, and then you start talking about Harvard and Yale and the King's College, which becomes Columbia, and then you bring it down through time, whether you're talking about Daniel Webster or John Dewey in the 20th century, and then you can't bring us in at the end of that and say, yeah, multicultural education. Hell no. You want to talk about true multicultural education? It starts with the beginning of education, and that would mean we have to even abandon the word education, educare from the Latin, and maybe go to something like seba, as ASALH says. I thumb my finger back there. Y'all can look up SBA. We've talked about that many. Seba, meaning wisdom or the wise. Also sebait, meaning teachings, meaning what? You can go back to the Egyptians. We have our own concepts of education, which is why we read The Education of Black People by W.E.B. Du Bois in office hours in Nubia. If you're going to talk about true multiculturalism, it's got to start at the beginning of humanity. And guess what? That's going to displace the Greeks and the Romans. Doesn't mean you can't contribute. You should contribute. Everybody should contribute, but that means everybody should contribute. And you can't do that because that will require you to give up the centering of yourself. That while you will say, I didn't start that. No, you didn't, but you're doubling down, quadrupling down, quintupling down, infinity dupling down on it. In your contemporary moment reinforces the fact that, in the words of Barry White, you're never ever going to give it up, never ever going to quit, because quitting just ain't your shtick. You can't stop centering yourself even when you call yourself being generous. But I'm bringing all this up as a prelude to this. As I was watching that Maya Angelou documentary last night and listening to James Foreman Jr. saying they told us that you couldn't do this with these young people, and we did it. Understand that that movement is part of the movement that takes public dollars into spaces that are beyond full public control, whether it be vouchers, whether it be charters. And that the battle we talk about, well, I'm against charter schools, I'm for public schools. Charter schools are public schools. I'm against vouchers. I'm against vouchers too, except now, if you're going to be doubling down and say, we're going to have vouchers, then you'll give me my money back, and I'm going to have some vouchers for the African-centered schools. This was the African-centered school movement of the 1980s and 90s, and I was there when that debate was taking place, when that conversation, that discussion was taking place. Do we take these dollars for African-centered charter schools? Many people said yes. And many people said no. Even I'm thinking about next month in April, the annual Nation Building Conference will be held here in the DMV. We talk about Nation House, the stalwart educational institution that did not take those dollars. And then you got other institutions that did take those dollars, but that's an internal governance structure conversation. And anyway, that was a long footnote to the point. I came out to get this popcorn. I watched this Maya Angelou thing. I think they're doing great work. Take that money. We wrote a charter for Sankofa Freedom Academy, a K-12 freedom school in Philadelphia. I'm very proud of that work. And it's a charter school. People say I'm against charter schools, but I'm not against that. Yeah, because they're going to do it anyway. Take our money. It's a lively conversation that we have to continue to have. Maybe some people want to pop in on office hours on Monday night if you're in Newbie, and we can continue this conversation, because I know stalwart educators all along that spectrum, whether it be Dr. Courtney Wilkinson, who is a public school principal right here in DC, and a Nubian who I'm looking forward to, Dr. Wilkinson, you coming in on Monday night, continue this conversation on Ikwe Armah that we're having around his book, The Eloquence of the Scribes, and whatever else you want to talk about, Doc. And then you got other folks who are charter school folk who are doing incredible, important work, but ideologically, you can see distinctions in that, all that work. So anyway, I came out, go upstairs. This young person says to me, I don't know how you do it. Well, I do it the way you did it. Yeah, she said, yeah, but I had to stop. And I just need some money, so I'll work here at the theater. I understand. And so when sometimes folks say, I don't know how you put up with people who talking crazy, or people, I say, there, but for the grace of God. And I can listen. I know everybody can't do that. And I know that there are moments when I shouldn't do it. None of us is perfect. None of us are even close. As Tao Tep says, the limits of one's craft are never reached. You got to just keep trying. I'm grateful for the thousands. And I'm not using that as a quantitative enumeration. I'm using it as a representation of the fact that more and more people are realizing that we need to have layered, nuanced conversations that are aimed toward, as Marie Kelsey would say, building unity. I am grateful that these conversations involve people who will have differences of opinion. Now, that's different than differences of fact. Facts are easy to acquire in some ways and very difficult to acquire in other ways. The farther back you go in human memory, the more difficult it is to acquire factual knowledge, which is why when I listen to historians speak with such certainty, I just kind of continue to listen, because I'm not at all certain well, I know that the sources of that certainty is an archival research tradition that is so deeply flawed that you shouldn't speak with certainty about a great number of things historically, particularly when you're talking about African people, particularly when your resources are alien institutions. But at any rate, a couple of things as we continue. One of the films that they showed last night was on 3 women, elders now, called the Paris 3, Paris, Paris 3. The Paris Three in 1961 were assaulted in a place called Paris, Kentucky. Two of the sisters actually participated in a fireside chat recently when this film debuted this month. Actually, Wida Allen, known as Granny Allen, and Margaret Nichols. Wida Allen, memory serves me correctly, is the sister when she was a young girl. This is what happened. These young people had been part of the shock troops of integration in 1961 in Paris, Kentucky. They had their black school. They loved their black school, their teachers, their principals, their classmates, and then again forced, as W.E.B. Du Bois would write in the Journal of Negro Education, to be used as a battering ram to get in these white schools in a deeply flawed strategy as far as I'm concerned. Brilliant legal strategy, Charlie Houston and them, but conceptually a strategy of desegregation that involved black people losing the best of what they had. None of the segregated schools were not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Let's not romanticize them. But at the same time, the core objective of those schools was absolutely what we needed and what we wanted and what we still want in our governance formations. In fact, there's a sign in the Green Book exhibit down at the Martin Luther King Library here in Washington, D.C. that closes today. And the sign reads, it's a commentary on desegregation, because we're not integrated to this day. That wasn't going to happen. True integration would say, start our memory at the beginning of human history. Now we integrated. Y'all not going to do that. You're never, ever going to give it up. Never, ever going to quit. Quitting just ain't your stick. I understand that. So how far we going to go? Yeah, that's how far we have to go. And if you want to measure our progress, measure it against that. And that's when you'll see that we got a long way to go. But there's a sign in the Green Book exhibit, and it says, somebody commenting on the loss of all these black businesses and the black schools and all that, but now we can go anywhere we want and be disrespected. It said, we got what we wanted, but we lost what we had. I stared at that sign a long time. I stare at it every time I go down there. We got what we wanted, but we lost what we had. We got what we wanted. What? The end of formal legal discrimination, even though we know it persists, of course. But at least now you got to work a little harder to do it. Some of y'all, some of you don't. We lost what we had. What was that? The bulwark of protection. Watching that Paul Dunbar documentary last night, I get a little emotional when I sit with our people, because the power of blackness, let me stop saying blackness, because I've even been rethinking that recently. The power of African people. Yeah, you know what? Let me just say this. I'm dropping all these pretenses at this point. Blackness is an important thing, and I could be convinced otherwise. And I know maybe office hours Monday night, somebody will come in and try to remind you now. I'll be 60 in a few weeks. And by the way, my sister Valethia Watkins Beatty, her birthday was yesterday. It's always the last day of Black History Month. Well, it's always the 20th of February. Sometime they ain't get, so happy birthday, Valethia, always. She's the lead dog.
Before you go on, because I've heard you mention this, being 60. What does that mean for you?
Nothing. I mean, let me not say this so quickly. It's a date on the calendar. It's all relational. Thank you, Prof. And we're going to talk about it in a minute.
Isn't it though? I mean, it does feel like a milestone. I already thought
like a milestone for you. What does it mean to you?
I forget how. Well, let me just be honest. I forget how old I am most times. Like
well, that means it don't mean.
It doesn't mean anything, but it might mean something. It might mean, I don't know. I'm not there yet.
It doesn't mean for me. It doesn't mean anything. I'll tell you why, because it's all relational dynamic for me. It doesn't mean it. I'm only saying that as a marker because I know it means something for other people. It's like, so when I say that I'm thinking about blackness differently, and somebody will say, well, no, because black. And I'm like, hold on. I've been thinking about this a long time. I'm just putting that number there. So that's all. I'm just putting that there. So in other words, I would say at 60, I think I've probably been thinking about blackness in a very deliberate, focused sense with study and listening and travel since I was at least 20. That's 40 years.
40 years.
So somebody come in and say, oh no, I couldn't even see you wrong because hold on. Let's talk through this now, because I've been thinking about this a long time. So to me, it's just a marker for length. It ain't a marker for accomplishment or comparative. Oh, by 60, I should have. Nah, because I think that's when the problem comes in.
Right. My dad actually was obsessed with 50 because none of his brothers made it to 50. His dad didn't make it to 50. So he thought he wasn't going to be here at 50. So 50 is always kind of that. So for me, getting to 50 was important. And I think time is important when you use it the way you do. And I want to thank you too, because I also adjusted how I'm treating the chat as a result of our conversation.
No, don't say that. No, look, you know what? I should say this public. I want everybody to understand this. The way you move through the world, look, when I said that we are one in this way we are, that's the way I am. You know what I'm saying? That's why I have to be very, like these Negroes talking about, oh, Jill Stein or Claudia De La Cruz. I said, no, y'all don't understand. The real people who want peace, who fight hard for peace, those are the Negroes. I'm sorry, Eric Adams, you weren't using it well, but I'm gonna use it well. These are the Negroes who love to fight. I want to kill everybody. The reason I'm saying peace is because the people who like, this is what Colin Powell said. You don't understand. The generals who don't want to use the army are the ones who want to kill everybody. They understand. Y'all don't want to kill nobody. Junior varsity Vance ain't gonna bust a grape in a fruit fight, sit up in that funky mascara talking to Zelensky. Zelensky should have got up and did what Hakeem Olajuwon did to Vernon Maxwell when Maxwell was spitting on the floor, mad because he missing shots. And Olajuwon told him, he said, man, that's unprofessional. And then Maxwell started cursing him, and Vernon Maxwell said, Hakeem Olajuwon he said he got them African hands, you know, like he been rubbing concrete, them hard ass hands. He got up, walked across the locker room. He said he slapped the shit out of me, and then he went back and sat back down. See, the minute Vance started disrespecting Zelensky, man, look, I'm ducking bomb. You know what? Let's stop talking. What you doing? I'm gonna slap the shit out of you, and this guy too, and that guy over there who asked me, why don't you wear a suit? Your man's came in here with a baseball cap on, and his little boy running around spitting around on the damn desk. You ain't saying nothing to him. Y'all a bunch of punks. And so I'm saying is, your spirit gather in the chat. That's my spirit. That's why I have to.
Yeah, I see. I do know that about you. I do know that about you.
We know that. You know what I'm saying? Everybody know that's how I am. So no, get it. Thank you. No question. I had to be. So and this actually ties very well to what I'm talking about here. The Paris 3. This documentary. It's called the series, the film series. Apparently, this short series that this particular cluster is called Honoring History, Inspiring Change. That's the broad rubric. These are a bunch of like 10 to 20-minute documentary, short mini docs. This one was called The Paris 3. And Weta Allen, Granny Allen, the film starts with her granddaughter saying, I love my granny. They say I'm like her. And then it closes with the two of them walking in Kentucky. This black girl talking about her grandma. These three elders were the age of the granddaughter in the film, teenagers. They had gone to the segregated school, their segregated high school. And then they were the shock troops of integration in 1961. Now they're going to desegregate. But as Granny Allen says in the film, these white schools did not want to desegregate. They wanted to integrate, but they only wanted the boys. And they only wanted the boys who were athletes because they wanted them for their football team. I want to say that again for every one of y'all who is thinking about going and running up and down a ball field in the slave economic concern, which would be Alabama, Auburn, Texas A&M, the University of Texas, any of those slave economic concern schools, the universities of Tennessee and Florida, all of these slave economic concerns, and all you want to do is get your supremely physically gifted ass out on a field in Clemson or the University of South Carolina. Yeah, basketball too, including women's. I'm sorry. This is for you. This elder said they only wanted the boys and they only wanted them for the teams. So if at the Ohio State University, where I went to school for 2 degrees, where this week they announced that they're canceling all their DEI programs, I was like, I love it. Do it. Now do football. Oh, no, you can't do football because DEI at Ohio State for football means the white players who never play, who then become assistant coaches and then head coaches. You know what I'm talking about. The ones who may have a little talent and then are given every opportunity to fail up. And when they're good, they are supremely judged as geniuses. Shout out to JJ Redick. And when they aren't good, continue to somehow get jobs. Sometimes they're general managers, but those are the people who fill out the roster at the Ohio State University. If you black on the roster at Ohio State, that means you can play. If you white on the roster at Ohio State University football, that means you can play or not you can play. But DEI preserves, DEI in this country means whiteness, means that you've got a spot. It goes diversity of talent, diversity, equity in capacity, inclusion of white people. So Ohio State canceling their DEI programs, no problem. If you black and you playing football for Ohio State, you need to rethink your whole life. And you say, oh, it's easy for you to say, but yeah, it is easy for you to say. Easy for me to say. Go back to 1992. Ask Aya Fubara and Nellie, who was Aya Fubara there before she and Ken got married. Ask her about Africans committed to improving our nation. Action. That's what we started after the Rodney King Rebellion in 1992. And we brought that whole university around. And we'll never forget the meeting we had at the Frank W. Hale Black Cultural Center, which is that going to be threatened now since you're cutting out all the black stuff at Ohio State? I'll never forget the meeting we had. The president of the university, Gordon Gee, my friend E. Gordon Gee, I will say that, who was the president of Ohio State then, now the president of the University of West Virginia. For many years was the chancellor at Vanderbilt University after he left Ohio State, was the chancellor at the University of Colorado. He done run a lot of universities, including some of the biggest in this country. At the time, Ohio State was the biggest university in the country. We had him and his whole cabinet hostage. Not physically hostage, although you might be able to say it was physically, because we invited them to a meeting after we had our list of demands, after we had marched on the president's office, the American flag was burned, all that in the wake of the Rodney King Rebellion. They came over to the Black Culture Center and we stayed there for hours. All these black students, black faculty, black staff, because when we said Africans, we mean everybody. The women cleaning up in the damn dorm after your children done thrown up in the showers after they was stumbling up and down High Street drunk on Saturday night. All the people who were on faculty, all the staff people, and all the students, we done packed hundreds, as many as we could, into that Black Culture Center and had the president in the middle of a circle with his whole cabinet there with our list of demands. And in that moment, I'll never forget a high point in that moment, because I'll never forget this. And somebody took a picture of it. If you go back to the archive of the student newspaper, The Lantern, which I read from, by the way, yesterday on Sirius XM Live when I was talking about this story. The Lantern has a front page picture. It's probably been like maybe April, March. No. Rodney King Rebellion was the spring of 92. So maybe a couple of weeks after that, when we had this meeting, there's a picture of me standing at the podium, and I'm standing there with James Otis Scotty Graham, my man Scotty Graham, who's now assistant athletic director at Arizona State University, a prime star running back for Ohio State University football, who then went on to play for the Minnesota Vikings, some other things, then transitioned through the NFL Players Association, now is working at the highest levels in academic and athletic administration. Scotty Graham standing there, a New Yorker, my man Scotty Graham, who, because of his interaction with us, we were all graduate students. He was an undergrad. Not only did he finish his degree, went and got a master's in Black Studies at Ohio State, because he finished early and came back and continued to do that work. Scotty Graham is a good brother. Scotty is standing there with me, and we looking at the president of Ohio State University with our fingers intertwined like this, black on black. And I said to Gordon Gee, you keep this up, and you're going to be watching a bunch of white boys lose the Big Ten every year. Because you see the skin right here, just the same skin. He an athlete, that's what y'all see. I'm academic, that's what y'all see. When we see each other, we're brothers. So please understand, you're playing with natural fire. Now, that conversation, when people say, oh, it's more complicated, nah, baby, it ain't complicated at all. My blood niece is one of the top hurdlers in the country coming out of high school, and she will be running for Allen Johnson at North Carolina Agricultural and Technical College. She's going to North Carolina A&T. She did her little unveil. I say little unveil. I didn't even know what that was. Where this unveil tradition came from? She on Instagram Live. Before I'm going to class, I'm holed up at Howard, because since she was a little girl and could start walking, soon as she could start walking, she started running. Her father, Randy Fuller, her mama, Gussie Fuller, my sister and brother, they like, you can't hold her down. She run everywhere, and I just knew she was coming here to Howard. And so I'm sorry, David Oliver, track coach at Howard University. Olympian, bronze medalist in the Olympics. You know, I wish she had run. She came up here, you know, and I think y'all moved a little slow on it, but you know what? That's all right, because Alan Johnson got 3 gold medals, including gold. But anyway, the point is that she'll be running for North Carolina A&T. She ain't running for the University of North Carolina or the University of Texas, which she could have. So when you say, well, it's more complicated, it ain't complicated. Get your mama, get your daddy, get your uncle, get your community people to stop getting them stars at their eyes and take them funky Buckeyes off the side of your head and go play for Tuskegee or somebody. Understand that you can do that, because they're not playing in your faces no more. They are literally insulting you to your face. We're cutting out all DEI, but we want you in words on our field. Y'all keep running. That's what we want. And so in that film, in that documentary, The Paris 3, what Granny Allen documents is, she said, they sent us to the white school, but they didn't want us. They just wanted the boys. And then they had a football game between the white school and the black school. But now some of those black kids that would have been playing for the black school, playing for the white school. And she said, they beat us by like 2 points in football. But she said, even as they beat us, we're some of our own players. She said, we still would have beat them, but the referees were on their side too. And people say, oh, yeah, that happens. Yeah, it happens. I've seen it many times when I was an undergrad at Tennessee State, and those stupid ass administrative leaders at Tennessee State. I'm not talking about the great Fred Humphreys. I'm talking about what came in the wake of Fred Humphreys, because Fred went to Florida A&M after he was the president of Tennessee State, and then they brought in stooges. I'm going to stop because now I'm fired up, and I need to calm down before I start naming some names in here, but that'll all be time now. It's time to write. Some people write early. I did some early writing. Some people live for decades and do their work and then convert some of it into writing. That's where I'm at now. So there should be a lot of nervous ass people in the world right now. Oh yeah. Anyway, the point is this, that I saw that referee cheating up close because they moved Tennessee State into the Ohio Valley Conference. And when they moved us into OVC in an attempt to lessen the blackness at Tennessee State, this is what a federal judge was like, they got to lose their, the plaintiff interveners was like, they got to lose their ethnic identity. They play too many black football and basketball teams, and so they're not in the league. Let's put them in the OVC. So I saw how referees cheat. So Granny Allen said they was cheating, and they still only won by 2 points. After the game, we went to get something to eat, and they are in this little cafe when the white girl waitress calls them N-words and say, you N-words, get out of here. And then there's a moment in the film where Granny Allen says, they're teenage girls at the time. Granny Allen says, yeah, I clocked her. And then everybody's laughing in the theater because the white girl put her hands on one of them. So you niggas get out of here. The white girl then says, call the police. She tells the cop she's pregnant. She tells the cop they assaulted her. It goes to the court. They lock these girls up, not in juvenile lockup, in jail, because they said they put us in jail, the juveniles. They don't never put us in the white kids they put in juvenile. They held them for 36 hours. Then they bring them before the bench. But she said, while we were in there for 36 hours, I could see out the back of where they had us locked up, and there was a man in the alley with a gun. And I watched that man. And after we got out, that man said, I was there because I overheard them talking. And they said they was going to take y'all out at midnight and move y'all. And I said, if they come here for y'all tonight, this is a black man. If they come here for y'all tonight, I'm going to kill all of them. I started clapping. A few other people started clapping. Most people didn't, because we've been trying not to clap. Kill them all, every last one of them. I will empty this whole ass rifle until I run out of bullets. And yeah, you may kill me, but some of y'all are going to be premature ancestors too. You're not coming to get these 3 black girls out this jail, you punk asses. And she said he laid there the entire time we were in that cell. And then she goes on to say that her mother and the other 2 girls' mothers worked cleaning up house, washing clothes, cooking food for 3 of the most powerful white men and white families in Paris, Kentucky. And that those men called that judge and said, look, it's time for you to retire. You need to let them go. Because one of the men, she said, you know, he loved my mother. I don't even know what that means. I know what it means. My mom worked in white folks' houses. I went with her on several occasions. Let me tell you about something. If it was up to me, you blow the whole funky settlers experiment up and renegotiate it, and everybody of goodwill come to the table. But you white nationalists, oh, let me be very clear. This ain't theory. It's years of study, years of listening, years of being community, and years of experience. I grew up in the post-Jim Crow South. I am one of those shock troops in the second wave that will bust. I've been in white folks' houses to call my mama Kathy. And if I saw some of them people today, I would slap the shit out of them. I promise you. So I understand that when you see me smiling, Smokey Robinson said, there's a smile on my face. It's only there trying to fool the public. But at any rate, at least when it comes to those kind of things. So in that film, you see her laying out the price of so-called integration, the so-called desegregation. And they were released and their records were ripped out. In fact, she said the white boy told the white judge, and you need to rip out the page where you even wrote their names down in your ledger. They should have no trace of a record. And she says, I want to thank them. That's the generosity. She said, I thank those 3 white men because they didn't have to do that. No, they did have to do it, Granny Allen. They absolutely had to do it as the price for their humanity. So it's not that people can't be human, but you do have to make a choice. And the choices we make should be dictated by comparing them to what we want, not what we think we can get, compared to what? Now let me bring it around to where we started this morning. We started this morning with compared to what, which of course is Roberta Flack. That was the Roberta Flack version. That version was released on her first album called First Take in 1969. That album was after that album, another version that came out that was much better known. Although Roberta Flack fans know that version. That was released by Les McCann and Eddie Harris live at the Montreux Jazz Festival, 1969. And that's the amped up version, not the one with the walking bass like Roberta Flack had coming in there softly with the piano and doing her thing. But the walking bass, not that version, but the Eddie Harris version with Les McCann. And you hear subtle changes in the lyrics too. So when you hear Les McCann and Eddie Brown, Les McCann and Eddie Harris, you hear them, love the line, lie the love, hanging on to push and shove. Possession is the motivation that is hanging up. The goddamn nation looks like we always end up in a rut. Everybody now trying to make it real compared to what? Then you have Roberta Flack. Boom, 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 doom, 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 doom. Love the lie, lie the love. Hanging on to push and shove. Possession is, she never rushed it. The motivation that is hanging up. She don't say goddamn, church girl. Whole damn nation looks like we always end up in a rut, trying to make it real. Then the horns come in. Compared to what? That song was written by a songwriter, Eugene McDaniel, out of Kansas City, Missouri. Eugene McDaniel lived until 2011. Eugene McDaniel, prolific, released many albums in the 1960s and 70s. Eugene McDaniel was a socially conscious cultural meaning maker who wrote Compared to What as an anti-war anthem. He also wrote Feel Like Making Love. He said, I wrote that one for Roberta Flack. Wrote it in 45 minutes. Strolling in the park, watching lovers do their thing. That's the time. He wrote that for her, Roberta Flack. Eugene McDaniel, they had a long relationship. He has a website. His website is still active, eugenemcdaniel.com. And in the liner notes for an album he released a couple of years after that, that song that Roberta Flack recorded and Les McCann recorded, compared to what, called Headless Heroes of the Apocalypse, he wrote the following on his liner notes. He says, "Special thanks to Miss Roberta Flack for not being afraid to help a brother. She, in my opinion, is a lady of quality, grace, humanity, and talent of the highest order. I love you, Bert. G." Gene, I raised him for a couple of reasons. Even as we think about Monday, as we were in office hours, getting the news of the transition of Roberta Cleopatra Flack. Roberta Cleopatra Flack. Don't you love it? Black folk don't be playing. We didn't lose our memory, not completely, and we've always fought to recover it. Roberta Cleopatra Flack. We've been talking about her all week. We've all been talking about, we played a lot of her music this week on Sirius and all of that. But in that conversation, thinking about the collaboration in a moment of cultural meaning making in our governance formations in the 1960s and 70s, social structure labelers, the same kind of sentiment that had our cultural meaning making receive labels we did not engender: hip hop, jazz, soul. They call that the soul jazz era, the era of Eugene McDaniels, the era of Eddie Harris and Les McCann, that period. But Roberta Flack, like Duke Ellington, beyond category. Shout out to Duke Ellington School of the Arts, as I said, who performed last night before the film started. And shout out to Roberta Flack, who, like Duke Ellington, was a product of the DMV. Ellington, of course, born in New York, born in Washington, D.C., the Washingtonians, his early band. Roberta Flack, having been born in North Carolina, and then family moved to Richmond, and then eventually right across the water from Washington, D.C. in Alexandria, Virginia, where she was raised in a segregated society community until at 15 years old, because of her prodigious musical talent, got a full scholarship to Howard University, where she graduated at age 19. Coming out of the College of Fine Arts and collaborating with the junior classmates and persons with whom she would share lifelong affiliation, like Donnie Hathaway, for example. We're not going to do Roberta Flack's discography today, just mentioning a few things. In fact, I was talking with the students about her this week, and one student, I said, well, she was here in 2022. Were any of y'all there? Had one student, brilliant young sister who was in fine arts. She's a musician herself. And as we were talking about Roberta Flack, she could name all the stuff, it's important that you do that. Oh, by the way, Eugene McDaniel also wrote two other pieces that a lot of people who are Roberta Flack stans, and I am a Roberta Flack stan, like many people here, should be all people, but many people here. He also wrote Reverend Lee and Sunday and Sister Jones. If y'all know Roberta Flack, you know them two songs. Eugene McDaniel wrote those songs with Roberta Flack in mind. But this young sister said, yeah, I was there. I said, you got to tell us about it then. This was my hip hop class, but I thought I needed to mention her, because then I played the one existing that I have been able to find clip where you see Roberta Flack with Lauryn Hill and the Fugees, because when, of course, they did Killing Me Softly and introduced to a new generation Roberta Flack's song, then Lauryn Hill near the end calls out Roberta Flack to the stage, and she says, Miss Roberta Flack, and then she takes the first, killing me softly with his song, oh, and then what is it? Singing my life with his words. And they going up and down the scale. Lauryn Hill going up and scale. And then here come Roberta Flack with that pure, killing me softly with his words. Very just like that. Not going up and down too much, just coming straight there, opening up her instrument and let it go. My God, the purity of that sound. Footnote on that song, Killing Me Softly, of course, the singer who originally collaborated with the two songwriters to write that song said that those lyrics came after she had been asked to be at a concert with these big name artists, and she came out to sing. And she said, this is the biggest crowd I've ever seen in my life. I was intimidated, but I went out there and did my thing. And I felt like the musicians were inviting me into this conversation and pulling me along and putting that floor that floor up under me. They knew my talent, but I was intimidated. Look at this huge, look at all these tens of thousands of people, but I'm going to do it. I'm a professional. And they were looking at me, and we had that meld, and that's what got me through it. And she said that was the inspiration that led me to comment on it. And the two songwriters who were working on a song end up writing those lyrics. And that's where Killing Me Softly came from. Of course, Roberta Flack makes it her song, but I was using it in the hip hop class because she had just made transition. This was a Tuesday, and we got the news on Monday. And I opened the hip hop class with Lauryn Hill and the Fugees, and then she calls out Roberta Flack, and they gave me the port of entry. And the young person said, yeah, she was there. She had a stroke. She was in a wheelchair. She had her sunglasses on, but she played the piano for us. She was in dialogue with us, and she said, let me show you. And she showed me a picture of the two of them together. This is 2022. Our genealogies are unbroken. But when you hear the song that Eddie McDaniel wrote, that Roberta Flack and Les McCann and many others recorded, John Legend recorded with the Roots. I mean, all kind of people have recorded compared to what? It was a political anthem. 2 years later in his album that, as I said, he released, Headless Heroes of the Apocalypse, the Vice President of the United States, Eugene McDaniel, believed this to the day he made transition. I've heard Questlove tell this story, many others tell this story, said that Spiro T. Agnew, the junior varsity Vance of the early 1970s, although best I can tell from the photograph, Spiro Agnew never wore eyeliner and mascara. Sorry, junior varsity. Like I said, maybe Zelensky should have tightened you up right there in the Oval Office. Little Marco was shrinking into the couch. You see little Marco, his morals, whatever he had, gone, sinking into the couch like Homer Simpson sinking into that bush in the popular gif. But at any rate, Spiro T. Agnew, who, as Gil Scott Heron said famously, Ag didn't know enough to stay out of jail. Spiro T. Agnew, a convicted criminal, eventually, Spiro T. Agnew called up Atlantic Records and said, this album need to be squashed. And Eugene McDaniel said the Vice President of the United States was like, this anti-war album I've got, this critical of the president album I've got, Headless Heroes of the Apocalypse. Eugene McDaniels didn't have a profile, even though he had released many albums in the 60s. Eugene McDaniels didn't have a profile of young Gil Scott Heron, who in 1969, of course, released Small Talk at 125th, which had the famous composition, The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. Of course, he was on smaller labels, Flying Dutchman and things like that. It was Atlantic Records. This is the same Atlantic Records that is memorialized by films like Ray. It was the same Ahmed Ergun who was called by the Spiro Agnew, according to Eugene McDaniel, to say, man, this album got to be squashed, and this guy's career needs to go into the ditch a little bit. So for many years, Eugene McDaniels lived in Maine. I think that may have been where he was when he made transition. He said, I'm happy up here. I'm a bit of a hermit. I enjoy myself. But his body of work was socially conscious work. And you hear it in the lyrics of Compared to What? The President. No. What's that second verse? Slaughterhouse is killing hogs. Twisted children is killing frogs. Poor dumb rednecks rolling logs. Tired old ladies are kissing dogs. Now, Les McCann, in his version, says, I hate the human love of that stinking mutt. God damn it. Trying to make it real compared to what? So Les McCann got that muscular. These people kissing dogs licking their ice cream, licking their face. My dog is my friend, my brother. What the hell? Roberta Flack, she says, I hate that stinking love, that stinking mud, that stinking mud. I hate that human love. No, I hate that human love, that stinking mud. Eddie Harris Les McCann, I hate the human love of that stinking mutt, which was the line that McDaniel wrote. Why did Roberta Flack change that line? Maybe she forgot the line. Or maybe she was making a deeper point. In other words, what does this affection for animals and non-affection for humans as you are killing people have to say about your way of knowing? I hate that human love, that stinking mud. Now, Les McCann just gets right to the point. I hate this human love of that stinking mud. But then the next set of lyrics, this sound like Curtis Mayfield. The president, he's got his war. Folks don't know just who it's for. No one gives us rhyme or reason. You have one doubt, they call it treason. We're chicken feathers, all without one gut. Trying to make it real. Compared to what? So McDaniel got smoke for what we got smoke for right now. We watching a whole ass clown. They are doing the whole thing. Elon Musk, like I said, I got out of the theater last night. I'm checking my phone and here, oh, news. Elon Musk have sent out another email. Something, what did y'all do this week? He don't care. Who gonna check him, boo? Mike Harriet, my man. Contraband camp is blowing up. Now I'm starting to see what you were talking about, Prof. You said last year that you and Mike were having conversations and he brought you in, he wants to collaborate, and this kind of contraband camp is in full bloom. Mike Harriet said, who gonna check y'all? We are. You're damn right we gonna check y'all. How far y'all want to go in this now? Because the conflict gonna be unavoidable. This one, look, a judge this week, this week, San Francisco, a Clinton appointee, 79 years old, said, look, there's no statute in the history of the universe that gives the Office of Personnel and Management the authority to be able to fire these probationary people, particularly when you got other units like the National Park Service and the National Institutes of Health that said they're going to retain theirs, and then OPM overrules them and gets rid of these people. The fight is now in the courts. So they're losing in the courts. No, you got to pay close attention. They haven't lost in the courts yet. The first two attempts to stop it were blocked. One for standing. They said the unions don't have the standing to be able to do it, meaning they don't have the ability to demonstrate harm to the union to be able to allow them to carry the case forward. No decision on the merits, no decision on the substance. And then the second time that they allowed it to continue, they went on to say, no, you haven't exhausted your remedies in the federal court. The administrative courts. That's a separate branch. You can't come to the federal court until you've gone through the process. These are procedural things. The third one, he allows it, and it's going to be appealed, and maybe it won't survive because ultimately it's all going to end up in the Supreme Court. But the point I'm trying to make is this: this is one of the battlegrounds that is still being fleshed, and in that process, what is being revealed is exactly that lyric that Roberta Flack and Les McCann were interpreting a little slightly differently from what McDaniels wrote when he said, president's got his war. Folks don't know just what it's for. People still trying to, should we be for Ukraine? Should we be against Ukraine? Here's what we should be for. Let's cut through all the politics. And remember, we talked about Ukraine when the invasion came up. You can go back in class and look for the number that when we talked about Ukraine, the history of Ukraine, Russia, all the stuff, Crimea, Black Sea, we talked about that. But here's the only thing you need to remember: we should all be against killing. Dr. Du Bois said, war is murder. So BB, you killer, we know you can ready to start up the engine again. We know the engine never stopped. You understand? You killer. Kagame, arming these rebels, M23 in Eastern Congo and Kivu, and coming in slaughtering people. The rapid support forces versus the federal the government of Sudan. Millions have been displaced, starving, murdered, slaughtered. The UN reporting this week out of Sudan that starvation waves are now beginning to explode again, even as they've never gone away. We should all be against murder. War is murder. So if you want to know which side to take in the United States versus Zelensky, you take the stop killing people side. And when some fat punk standing up behind the couch in the Oval Office, why don't you wear a suit? You ain't ask your friend that with that dime store snapback trucker, make America again, and all black AC/DC goth, you need therapy and some medicine friend that when he busted up in the White House, when he stood up on a cabinet meeting, standing up over an entire clown car cabinet between Lil Marco and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as people getting measles outbreaks in Texas, and you talking about don't vaccinate nobody, and the secretary from Brill Cream, who is trying to replace everybody with any experience in the Pentagon with his white nationalist friends so he can loose the crusade on y'all ass. Ain't nobody, you ain't saying none of that fool as he was circling around, and you saw that dime store personal injury lawyer who's now the secretary, the attorney general, or WrestleMania. You didn't ask none of them. You ask him, he walking around, but you got that smoke for Zelensky. He just stood and slapped the shit out of y'all. But the point is this: he didn't, because he does need the money. And so people are saying, well, Ukraine, they're just saying the quiet part out loud. You better be careful. They'll kill him like they did. They'll put him in jail like they did Noriega, or they'll kill him like they did. Okay, yeah, yeah. We know geopolitics. If we don't know geopolitics, we should study it. But let's be clear, we can all be against killing. The president, he's got his war, folks just don't know who it's for. No one gives us rhyme or reason. You have one doubt, they call it treason. And that's what they're lining up now to loose the military on folk. But Roberta Flack was singing about that and compared to what album she released several months before Les McCann made the version that most people are familiar with. But then she got the most smoke. I think this is governance smoke in the third stanza. Eugene McDaniel wrote, go to church on Sunday, sleeping not, trying to duck the wrath of God. Preachers filling us with fright, trying to tell us what he thinks is right. He must be some kind, I love her enunciation, oh, stupid nut. Trying to make it real, but compared to what? First said, he must be some kind of stupid nut. You gonna distract us now as we see this boycott yesterday. Reverend Al Sharpton, Reverend Jamal Bryant, putting their platforms to good use. Now, I grew up in the Christian church. I got no smoke for it. We got stalwart ministers in this Nubian nation. I know Reverend Wingard is here. Dina Wingard, my law school classmate at Ohio State, who got her own thoughts, I'm sure, about this Ohio State Persian DEI. We all know, because Dina know when we showed up at Ohio State University School of Law, they thought y'all here because of affirmative action. F you, your mama, and everybody in your whole funky ass bloodline. And never forget, we are your grandparents, and we know more than you know. Because we know yours and ours. You know yours, and not even that quite well. Dina practiced law a long time and now is in the ministry on top of that. And of course, we have the Reverend Dr. Jeremiah Wright, who always used that platform. By the way, happy belated birthday to Reverend Otis Moss Jr., not the third, who is the minister now, of course, at Trinity United Church of Christ, following Jeremiah Wright, but his father, the legendary Morehouse man. Both of them are, of course, Otis Moss Jr., whose birthday was last week. But in the process, you got ministers doing the right thing. Then you got these other people, these prosperity gospel Negroes that everybody I named is death on, and Roberta Flack sang was death on, channeling McDaniel's lyrics. You must think I'm some kind of stupid nut trying to make it real compared to what? And then, of course, they go through, and Les McCann goes through the break, and they play, and then Roberta Flack, beautiful pianist, classically European trained pianist, bringing in the soul style of the church, all of her stuff. Again, probably my favorite Roberta Flack is the collaboration with Donnie Hathaway on that album when they sing, "Come ye disconsolate, where ye languish." Then Donnie Hathaway comes in, "Come to the mercy seat," and they bring in the duet. Oh man, what a beautiful. And then of course at the end of that, when they like, "Earth has no sorrow that heaven cannot heal." So I know what that church is. I know that way of knowing. I grew up in that way of knowing. This is separate from the critique of pimps. Even as these white nationalists surround themselves with the marks of what they think is Christianity. The Klan was Christian. The same Klan that we saw shoot at the Chattanooga 5 in that movie I saw, that film I saw last night at the African American History Month Film Festival in the Lincoln Theater on U Street as my children were walking up and down U Street going to parties. They called themselves Christian too, the Klan. And those black men put the Klan ass out of business and showed everybody the playbook. They call themselves Christian. That fool Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Bureau Cream, who now runs the Pentagon, calls himself a Christian soldier. He's a crusader, old ass white nationalist crusader. So I understand that ain't this. That ain't what Donnie Hathaway and Roberta Flack are singing about. That's not what Dina Wingard and Jeremiah Wright and Otis Moss Jr. and the third are talking about. This is not what Frederick Douglass Haynes is talking about. This is a different kind of thing. It ain't the same. It is the thing that David Walker said, they are not Christians, but the devil, and you are now authorized by God to end your oppression. Because getting them out the way ain't anti-Christian. In fact, it's the most Christian thing you can do. Shout out to the Reverend Nat Turner. And in the end of that song, compared to what? Roberta Flack. I love the Les McCann version. It's got that rage. That's how I would do it. But that constraint, that personalized, that gift of the instrument that Lauryn Hill said, when I hear Roberta Flack, it's like a perfect singer. When the interviewer said, Roberta Flack said, they were interviewing him, and they said, you sound like Nina Simone, you sound like Aretha Franklin, or you sound like Dinah Washington. She said, that's good. That means I got my own style. You sound like Billie Holiday. You could, Roberta Flack, straight down the middle. Ooh, my goodness. When you hear Jesse, come home. There's a hole in the bed. Oh man, that Roberta Flack said, where's that bee? And where's that honey? Where's my God? And where's my money? Unreal values, crass distortion, unwed mothers need abortion. Kind of brings, no, she said, kind of brings to mind, oh, young King Tut. Then here come the horns. He did it now, trying to make it real. But compared to what? Then she rides it out and allows herself the flexibility to soar over those notes. But you know, that last lyric, I would have liked to have heard Eugene McDaniel walk us through those lyrics. Because again, we'll be going to Kemet. We'll be back in Kemet this August, inshallah, is the Lord willing. And by the way, Ramadan has begun, the new year, Islamic New Year. So everyone who celebrates Ramadan and every one of us who observes those who do celebrate it and stand in solidarity in our common humanity with you. Ramadan Mubarak. You know, so, you know, the display of discipline that it requires. And Lamont was saying yesterday on the radio that he and his family observed it many times over the years. So that's a beautiful thing. We could all use a little fasting. So, but I will be back in Kemet in August. And that last combination where McDaniels threads through all the stanzas, where he says, you know, where's that bee? Where's that honey? You know, it's where the material resources, where is the ability to take care of ourselves without hurting other people. We're not talking about naked pure capitalism, are we, Milton Friedman? You are, you know. We're not even talking about DEI. I was watching John Hope Bryant in Atlanta. He was being interviewed by somebody. Oh, it might have been Cam Newton. It was Cam Newton. Everybody got a podcast now, right? And I incidentally saw that. And I saw a clip of it. And John Hope Bryant, who we've had our little dust-ups over the years because I'm not a capitalist, and neither was Martin Luther King, so you're going to stop putting Martin Luther King name in your mouth on that. But, or you can keep telling, I mean, obviously, generosity, we should be able to talk with each other. But one thing he said I thought was interesting, he said, I don't care about DEI. I don't really care about DEI. He says, what's clear is that, you know, in the 50s, when we were talking about integration and all that, white people were 90% of the population. Your number's slightly off, but not so much to, you know, it's a distinction without a difference. But then he said, right now white people are about 40% of the population, and the next generation are going to be the majority. What these people understand, they need to understand is, unless you're going to go learn Mandarin, meaning Chinese, then the only way this country going to make it is that we're going to have to be together. Well, guess what? Elon Musk doesn't care whether the country makes it. He's too busy trying to figure out how he's going to get all these resource minerals and get the hell off the planet. That's why he ain't got no beef with China. Donald Trump don't care either, as long as he can finish the job that the killers of the Israeli Defense Force have done and put up his Trump hotels in Gaza. They don't care about a flag. Those who do care about the flag are too stupid to realize that this country is already dead. And that if you want to create a different type of space, what you can do now is to try to create a solidarity politics that extends past these borders and reaches out to other people in our common humanity, because what the bulletin is going to reach everybody else is, whether you see it in Greece now, whether you see it in France now, whether you see it in Latin America now, whether you see it even in China. In fact, there's a new book out. I just got it. I haven't had a chance to crack it yet, on the intellectuals and the student movements in China who are pushing back against the government, is that whether it be in Nigeria or South Africa where young people are like, this thing got to be negotiated. All of the nation state as a concept is being renegotiated. And guess what? There is no country in the world that will escape it. And that includes this funky settler criminal enterprise called United States of America. So when John Hope Bryant says the diversity is the strength and we have to pursue that, he's absolutely right, except he's thinking about diversity in the context of nation states. I'm asking the question that Eugene McDaniel and Roberta Flack and Eddie Harris and Les McCann's answered. Yeah, solidarity compared to what? Compared to what? The social structure question in our Africana Studies framework asks the question, who are African people at any moment in time and space that we're studying to other formations, to other people, to other entities? Who are Africans to the United States of America? They are labor. They are labor. When you withdraw your labor, whether it be in a one-day boycott or a 300+ day boycott like the Montgomery bus boycott, or a sustained action of withdrawal and repurposing your resources like what we are doing here. Joy Reid lost her job. That was MSNBC. I ain't saying come to death row, but you could come to Nubia and Narrative. You can come to the Black Star Network. You can come to Fan Base. We have some. You can come to Contraband Camp. There's a hub news, HUB. Check it out. Karen Hunter has built that space there. Because we are the global majority. In other words, God bless Joy Reid. Seems like a good sister. She's putting down the fire in the space. She's doing it, but just like Spiro Agnew called Atlantic Records and said Eugene Daniels must be canceled, they sent the same person as Martin Lamont Hill and I were talking with Haki, and we were talking on Sunday. And Mark told everybody, you can go to the Sankofa website and see the conversation. He said, the same person that fired me at CNN is the one that gave the news to Joy Reid at MSNBC. Because you don't own it. And Roland spent the better part of an hour deconstructing, as he uses the term, the whole firing of Joy Reid. And it ends with support the Black spaces, not the Black fronted spaces, not the included some Black voices spaces. Because at its best, it could look like Joy Reid putting that fire down and you lose your job. At its worst, it maybe looks like Van Jones, my friend Van Jones, or Stephen A. Smith. You gotta give that brother a chance. You gotta give Elon Musk a chance. You gotta give him a chance. Okay, Steve. It's bruh. In the words of a brother who, suffered a personal setback, but ain't never had no spiritual setback, of course. And I'm talking about none other than our good brother LeVar Ball, who had his foot amputated, whatever the hell crisis was. Brother, we hope you heal from it quickly, and we know you can't stop your spirit. But as he said about a man who has lost his mind and after losing all his jobs is going on social media platforms to continue to try to remain relevant, the only thing Jason Whitlock can talk about is snacks. Well, then the only thing Stephen A. Smith can talk about is, wait, I better find, what can he, basketball? Is it? I don't know. Anyway, but I know what it ain't. It ain't electoral politics. So my point is, when it's on the worst side of it, the employees talk about things to get eyeballs and clicks and say crazy stuff. On the best side of it, the employees talk about things to get eyeballs and clicks and build an audience and are trying to speak truth to power. That's what Joanne Reid was doing. But Joanne Reid is not Rachel Maddow. Understand the true diversity, equity, and inclusion. That white woman is white. So DEI means that means white women too, like the brother in South Carolina said. The man changed the title in the company and gave it to his wife so that they could get the DEI money. And Rachel Maddow can talk smack every night on MSNBC. Joy Reid can't say what she said, but guess what? If she was in Narrative Nubia, she could say it. If she was a Black Star on Fan Base, she could say it. And everybody moving to Substack. You don't own Substack either. Maybe you would consider subscribing to Contraband Camp. This is the moment, because when you say we need to be independent, we need to speak truth to power. Compared to what? Compared to what? You're trying to make it real, but compared to what? In fact, Eugene Daniel didn't write that, but in the lyrics, Les McCann and Eddie Harris don't sing it that way. Incidentally, yes, but not consistently. Roberta Flack, trying to make it real. But compared to what? But for the better part of 10 years, Roberta Cleopatra Flack taught school in the DC public schools. A master of lyric, a master of music. She said, I taught in some classrooms, we didn't have musical instruments, so we had to make some. This is when you hear Roberta Flack, you're not just hearing a beautiful, gifted talent. You're hearing someone who acquired institutional education in Black formations, those Black formations that have been compromised by some people searching for whiteness. Just like they said to Paris 3, we weren't looking to go over to that school. They wanted our boys to play football, but we were very happy where we were. And when that white girl put her hands on us in that cafe, I did what Zelensky probably should have done to J.D. Vance. I clocked her. And then we was down there, and the brother guarded us all night. And then the white boys came in and showed true solidarity. That's what the renegotiated terms look like. I am not Black, but this is wrong. And therefore, I am going to correct it. And I have the power to do so, which then leads me to, we kind of begin to wind these things up, leads me to a question. As I'm watching these things last night, as I'm watching these documentaries and thinking about the things you think about when you're sitting there. And I get to the point where I was like, let me write some of these things down. So I'm looking in my bag. I always carry some note cards, and I'm trying to scribble in the dark. And then I realized, no, just relax. Just listen. Leaning on that listening to begin to make sense of that. And as I'm watching, I'm asking myself, at what point do we get to the point where we have people who are in power, that don't have to line the alley with a shotgun, putting their whole life at risk, saying, I will kill all of y'all until y'all kill me, but killing me is ultimately where we will probably end up. If we must die, let us nobly die, as Claude McKay will say. But I don't want to die. I want to walk in and tell the judge, I want to tell the judge, don't do that. And the judge listen to me. Or better yet, I want to be the judge. See, we need Angie Porter writing the articles, but we needed her at some point to be a judge, maybe even on the Supreme Court or on what comes after the Supreme Court, because that funky criminal enterprise can't be renegotiated until we understand that renegotiating it means we're going to have to get a little bit past what Brother Langston, congratulations, Brother Langston, we'll be bringing you up soon. Langston Morrison, who will be graduating from law school, who is a Nubian, who came back in the conversation after not being there for the better part of a year. It's good to see you, brother, which is correct. Because I don't know how our good brother Marlon is doing it at Texas Southern, but he's somehow managing to read everything and do the studying and do top rate work. Langston been doing that too, and he's graduating from law school soon. But as he raised in office hours on Monday night, for those of you who are in Nubia, the question of stare decisis, the question of precedent. See, at the heart of Western jurisprudence is the idea that once it has been decided, stare decisis, it comes down through the years, and you must take that into account when you're making your ruling. But what these hillbillies are doing now, including their manservant, Clarence Thomas, who asked the first question this week in the oral arguments in the Ohio case, where the white woman said, you fired me after demoting me, and before that I didn't get the job, and you hired 2 gay people instead of me, and I'm suing because as a white person I shouldn't be discriminated against. And it looks like the Supreme Court is going to take her side, saying that protections should not apply unequally because of race, which we can all agree with conceptually, but that's not what they really mean. But one of my law students was there Wednesday night. The oral arguments were Wednesday night in class. I asked him, I said, were any of y'all down there? And he said, yeah, I went. I said, well, tell us about it. He said, Clarence Thomas asked the first question. I said, you lying. Clarence for years didn't speak at all. But he's feeling his oats now, this manservant, as Laurence Victoria Burke would refer to Byron Donalds, who ain't going to be the governor of nothing. I'm sorry, bro. You can announce what you want on Sean Hannity. Them white people not going to make you the governor of Florida, especially if DeSantis' wife, Casey, runs. But anyway, story for another day. As Laurence Victoria Burke refers to him, Byron Donalds, a consensual manservant. There is a justice on the Supreme Court who is a consensual manservant. Of course, that would be Clarence Thomas. We need Angie Porter to be justice. Ketanji Brown Jackson is young. Ketanji Youngika Brown Jackson. Maybe Angie Porter can be there. But she don't want to be there. Maybe she can be something on what comes next, because something can come next. Because when we think of success and we think of moving the needle, we always have to ask ourselves the question, compared to what? So here we are, the first week. Now we pause and reset for a moment. I won't recap the Blackest History Month ever, but I will. This is February, of course, the Blackest History Month. But I will mention a couple of things. On Saturday, after we left class, left our session, went down to the Westin Hotel here across from the Carnegie Library in D.C. for the Black History Month annual Black History Month program. I want to thank the good sister, the president of ASALH, the Association for the Study of Afro-American Life and History, Dr. K. Whitehead, also Dr. Sylvia Jacobs, Sylvia Cyrus, who is the executive director of ASALH, and the entire ASALH team, for asking me to moderate a luncheon keynote panel. We had a good time. And by the way, passed on the greetings to Mark Morial. Karen, you know he ain't gonna break character. Oh yeah, tell my sister. Yeah, okay. Just letting you know. I know, there it is. Face, giving face. You know I had to do it. I said I was going to do it. I told the world I was going to do it. No question. If y'all haven't heard that, y'all missing it. Larry is mastering this game. Larry, you mastering this game of taking these clips when you roast people. That one to me also probably should be. If y'all not subscribed to Sirius XM 126 and y'all not listening to Karen Hunter show, especially, you should probably go back and if you can get a hold of that and listen to that. But he and Christine Sampson Clark, a good sister who is executive committee member of the National Education Association, NEA, the three of us in conversation. And it was a beautiful conversation to have. I was happy to be able to do that. I want to also just raise a couple of other people. Saria Manson, young Saria Manson, I think she's 15 or 16. She is a student at the Carter G. Woodson High School in Fairfax, Virginia. She sang the national anthem. Yes, not the old Say Can You See. I was not at Fort McHenry. She sang, of course, Lift Every Voice and Sing. All three verses. You go ahead, Saria. And as she was coming out, we were backstage, and my homegirl, I say homegirl because she's from Nashville. I'm from Nashville. Of course, the great elder Mary Frances Berry, who we interviewed on Sirius. We were backstage, and she got a chance to talk with her. And I got a chance to sit for about 10 minutes, just the two of us talking with Lonnie Bunch, the secretary, the 14th secretary of the Smithsonian Institution. And I was grateful for that conversation because it gave me a chance to do a couple of things. One, I think that In Slavery's Wake exhibit that's not permanent, it's traveling around the world, it's leaving here in a couple of months. I said, man, if there's a way for y'all to get a copy of that, to me, that should be the front porch of the museum. And then I continued by reminding him of a conversation that we had years ago when they were starting the museum, and he was over at Howard to have a conversation with us about what should be in the museum, about the design. I've never liked the fact that we start with the ass whippings. And Lonnie Bunch is you talk about generosity. His generosity is the kind that he's talking about all the people around the country they surveyed and what they wanted to see and didn't want to see, and how he wanted to trouble conversation, and there's no one American narrative. It was very, very useful to have that conversation with them. So Sharita Thompson, again, thanks sis for the committee co-chair for inviting me to be in that conversation. And then of course that was just the last week, and there were a lot of other things that took place this week. I want to mention Dr. Garvey, Julius Garvey, who was on Howard's campus on Wednesday. These are 3 books that have come out recently. This is the one that we've seen many times. This is Justice for Marcus Garvey, Look for Me in the Whirlwind. This is an anthology edited by Julius Garvey. He was there to talk about Dr. Garvey. Dr. Garvey was there to talk about his father's pardon and the context. Justin Hansford, my man Justin Hansford, who directs the Thurgood Marshall Center at Howard University School of Law, one of the lawyers, along with Mr. Pierre, who fought for this pardon. And Dr. Garvey had some remarkable things to say about what that means. He said, it really isn't about a pardon for my father. It really isn't about this context of America. It's really about restoring our memory. And he took it back to Egypt. It was fascinating to see. In fact, this is a book that just came out. It's called Be Woke, written by Dr. Julius Garvey. This just came out. So I don't even know how you can, Garvey Press and Whirlwind Publishing. Yes. So look, the book is, there's a Be Woke app in the Google store and the Apple store, so y'all can look this up. Be Woke. This is a book by Dr. Julius Garvey. And they've also the Garvey Press has released a revised version of Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. This is what they call the one that's approved by the Garvey estates. I want to mention that. So because we're now out of the Blackest History Month, and now we are in the regular Black History Month of March with the added the added incentive to focus on women of African descent, even though we focus on women of African descent 12 months out of the year. So as I end, I'll mention one other event and then end with a book that just came out to start March the 1st. Since we're talking about women generally of African descent, Sunday afternoon, of course, as I mentioned, there was the launch of this book for Gaza's children. Black, brown, and Jewish writers and poets speak out. Mark Hill, Hakeem Aboudi, and Keith Gilliard, editors. And many of the, some of the contributors were there. My man, Tony Medina. There are a couple of folks who are Jewish who contributed to this. One Puerto Rican Jew and one European Jew. Jason Cohen has a piece in here. Jonathan Tillove has a piece called Lamentation. How can a Jew not weep for the children of Gaza? And as I said, at the end of this book, there's a piece that says Third World Press Foundation anticipates publishing a volume to increase awareness about the crisis that has been intensifying over the past 18 months in Sudan. More than 5 million people have been displaced by military conflict, and more than 7 million people, 1/3 of whom are children, now suffer from malnutrition and lack of access to clean water and essential medical services. Queries are welcome from prospective editors and writers. And Prof, we were talking, Paul and I, while we were there, and I mentioned this to Haki too, about, it's not a fantasy because it can be done. We have everything we need to do it. I would love nothing more than this statement, this Black, statement, to have Third World Press, Africa World Press, with Kasahun Chikole, my good sister, Dr. Ayo Sakai, and her publishing company, and I'm on the board of that publishing company, and Haki and Paul with Karen Hunter collaborate on some type of thing that it could be a small thing. And I've been thinking about that a lot, and I'm going to say less about it now. But that would really make a statement. God bless Joy Reid. God bless Melissa Harris Perry. God bless Van Jones. God bless Eddie Glau. God bless everybody who is sitting on a studio set with some open white nationalists like Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, or some soft white nationalists. I mean, God bless Abby Lincoln. God bless Don Lemon. But let's be clear. We have to do for us, by us, and that will be the thing that keeps us out of the abyss. This is the one book I'll mention. Well, let me see. Do I have Eve's book here? Hold on a second. Let me see. No. I'll talk about Eve Ewing next week. Okay. This book just came out. This is what I mentioned. Another Sojourner Looking for Truth. Oh, I see now. We've been going for 2 hours. I'm going to stop. This is Millicent Brown, Dr. Millicent Brown. She, retired professor at Claflin, down there where Cat Adams is. This is her memoir, Another Sojourner Looking for Truth. It covers, she was one of the plaintiffs as a child for the case that made the Supreme Court that outlawed segregation in Charleston, South Carolina, where she was in school as a little girl. She ended up cycling through the Black Power movement, the Republic of Africa. We're going to talk more about her. I'm not going to rush it because I think we need to have some conversation. So thank you, Prof. I know we went over. That was a bit of a long stretch. But a
couple of corrections is Abby Phillip. Abby Lincoln.
Phillip. Did I say Abby Lincoln?
Warrior. You said Abby Lincoln, but I
said Abby Lincoln.
Okay, we love Abby Lincoln, and
I love Abby Lincoln. Oh my God, Abby Phillip. Yes,
don't put the Abby.
No, them two. No, they both Black women, but yes.
Also, Mike Harriet's Contraband Camp is actually part of Substack.
But he owns it. Wait, how does that work?
We could talk off mic, but you
know what? Yeah, thank you, because you know what? I get so hyped. I think, you know what? Thank you, Professor Hunter. Oh, and thank you, Mike. I still subscribed, but okay.
Yeah, me too, because we're everywhere. I mean, it's going to be really hard for us to run into spaces where they don't, which is the work, right? To build institutions. What Roland has been able to do is unprecedented in this time, right? And what we have been able to do is unprecedented. Even our space in Sirius is in somebody else's situation. Only Nubia Narrative is something that is completely us, by us, for us.
I know we went over, but do you mind, people are listening here, could you say something about that? Because you've walked in all these worlds. When I was listening to Joy Reid, and then of course she went live, I'm thinking, is it that unprecedented to have a space like there? I was thinking about the social. I mean, could you talk a little bit?
I mean, you know what it requires.
Yeah, and I know, and I also don't know. because you
Right.
you never don't do anything. It's like you're doing all of it. People need to understand that too. I'm just
Which is why, for us to be in a space, you have to be strategic. But if you're centering us, then you utilize these spaces to feed the institution that you're building that will not be compromised, right? So you use those spaces. But what happens is, Dr. Carr, and having been, you're right, CNN, I was on contract with MSNBC way before all of these people. But what I learned really quickly is that at any point in time, they could pull the rug, as they did to me when I said something that I thought was harmless, that Mitt Romney doesn't care about Black people. Basically, I did a Kanye West, but I called it Caucasian stand. He wanted to be president of that. That got me sat down. I was like, I thought it was clever and accurate.
no question.
Oh, wait, y'all are
well,
all like,
you're not DEI. You're not Scott Jennings, who can be a whole ass racist on air and just never say anything. Yeah, that's right.
Right. But I didn't realize the game until that moment. And I was like, oh, I'm still under contract for a year and they're not bringing me back on the air, but they're paying me.
So it ain't even about the money.
No. So that's when I was like, oh, I'll never, ever, ever be at their mercy, even when I'm in their house.
Oh, that's fascinating. So how do you, I know you, this again, we could have this conversation at
time. Yeah,
Mark was saying that Sunday night about how when they came for him, and he said when he was on Fox, he was winning too many arguments. I remember he told me that years ago, and I was like, yeah, man. So he said, yeah, man, Bill O'Reilly. So I met
with the Fox guy before he left with Rupert Murdoch, with Roger Ailes before he did whatever he did, wherever he is. It's probably real hot there. But he said to me, because I was making those rounds, and I remember sitting in his office, and he said, you're amazing, but we can't have you on these airwaves. I don't know what we would do. So they probably had the same conversation because they have an agenda. So my point is we should have an agenda, and the agenda should be due north, and it should be uncompromised. But what happens is, Dr. Carr, and I'm going to say this, the money is really good, to get paid to come on. And I know what it costs. I know what they're getting paid to sit weekends. That's lots of money. Those are a lot of zeros. Every night during prime time, lots of zeros. Not many people are going to, especially if you've never had that money, which is why I think leaders should be either people that don't care about money like you, or people, because you don't care about money at all.
No.
At all, y'all, at all. I'm like, sir, can you fill out the paperwork so we can pay? But
I'm grateful though. But yeah, it's
or people that come from money, meaning that it's not
from money.
Hi. That for them, money is not a thing because it comes and goes and whatever, and it's I don't need it to define me. I don't need the fame to define, so we have a lot of compromised people who come from lack, like the same people that come out of the caves. It's the same mentality, even in Black form, right? If you don't come from much, a lot of times when you get it, it's like, unless you've been sitting and sitting at the feet of people, that's like, this is not the game. I'm saying a lot. I'm not going to say much more, but I just wanted to just lay the foundation that even people that you may think are self-made or whatever, there's somebody funding that. And when you get money from people, or somebody has got money from Bear Stearns or whatever, you do feel an obligation to do what they tell you to do because it's their money.
Yeah.
Who's going to be like, no, I'm not going to listen to you, because they'll just pull the money. And you don't want to pull the money because in your mind, you're thinking the greater good. So I'll make this little compromise. This is why I'm uncompromised. This is why I'm zero tolerant, because I know those little compromises become big compromises. And before you know it, you've compromised yourself right out of the very thing that you set out to do. And it happens slowly, like a frog being burned 1 degree cooked in a pot. It happens slowly before you know you can't even get out of the pot. So the goal is not to get in the pot. The goal is to be zero tolerant and have your due north from the door. So when they come, they're going to always come with the buckets of money, unless they know they can't. And then they'll come with the bullet.
And then they come with the bullet.
Yeah. So there's that.
And look, I know we got some housekeeping to do. And I said we're going to
want to ask you, somebody in the chat had a good question.
What's that?
Akachineke? I hope I'm saying your name right, Akachineke. She said, you said I'm dropping all pretenses regarding Blackness. She wanted to know what that meant.
Oh yeah, let me say that very quickly. And by the way, trying to pull up the Nubia chat too. I pull up both chats because a film I didn't mention, I just want to mention quickly. It was a short film, and everybody can watch it on Joan Trumpauer, her son Loki. She was a civil Joan Trumpauer, funny. Joan Trumpauer was a member of SNCC. She's part of the Black Freedom Movement in Mississippi. White woman. She's a Delta. She's one of the Delta State Five. Every time I would see Joan Trumpauer, her son Loki did a documentary on Vernon Dahmer, who we've talked about, but in passing. Vernon Dahmer, of course, lost his life in Mississippi. The Klan came and shot up their house, shot up the little store they had on their property where his 86-year-old aunt was. She escaped. The wife escaped. Vernon Dahmer escaped with his life in the short term, died in the hospital. It's called Dying to Vote. And the film contrasts that moment in Mississippi with the January 6th riot. And you see Benny Thompson talking about the connections. And the last words that Vernon Dahmer's son, who is the narrator throughout the film, says before they ask him, what's the last words you remember from your father? He said, I was in the hospital. The place was packed and I could see him in the bed, but I was standing in the hall watching. My wife, my mom was there. And he said, he rose up off the bed, called my mother's name, and then lay back down. He made transition. But his voter registration card came a few days after that. And he said, he asked his father, what does it mean? Is it worth your life to register to vote? This is earlier. And Vernon Dahmer said, if you don't vote, you don't count. Man. Anyway, I say that to say that ultimately you've got to participate. Blackness, and to answer that question separately, Blackness, I've been rethinking it because there's a ceiling. And let me sit here just for maybe 5 seconds and be quiet to pull this together without going on and on about it. We can talk more about this in the office hours. Blackness has a point of origin that amputates our collective memory. When you say Black people, you have absolutely put us in time and space in a way where we enter with captivity. That's why I don't say slaves now. I'm experimenting, as you said. Language is very powerful, as you always remind us and model for us. Instead of slaves, captives. Instead of slavery, human trafficking. See, what we're doing at that point, we're not arguing over who's human. Human trafficking. As Du Bois said at the beginning of Black Reconstruction in America in the preface, he said, I'm starting with the assumption that we're human. So those of you who are reading this with some question about that, you should stop reading now. Because I'm starting with the assumption that we're human. So he's talking about African people, but he's putting it in a common framework. That's why in the Africana Studies conceptual categories, we say that the social structures and the governance structure formations all existed in Africa. It is race is introduced when you take Africans out of Africa and subject them to a racialized system with asymmetrical warfare. Because as you said, war assumes two sides fighting equally. This is asymmetrical. There was never a declaration of war made. It's asymmetrical, and there was never a truce. That's why it's perpetual. You can use the framework. Finally, to the people who would say, and I'm one of those people who absolutely thinks about this as well, the concept of Blackness transcends captivity. It absolutely does. Him where, for example, as Mario Beatty teaches us, and Theopalo Benga and Sheikh Anta Diop and many others, Benachi Montgomery and Riketti Wimby, so many others teach us. Him where, the great Black in Medu Neter, when you say Kim, whether it be Kemet and one of the names for the Nile Valley, whether you say Kim Ware, the great Black, you're talking about a concept of Blackness that isn't racial. So it absolutely transcends. But here's my answer to that, in my mind, at least at this point, and that is, when we say Black, we don't mean that. What we mean is the captivity and that came in the wake. So once you say Black, regardless if you talk about Black excellence and Black style and the Black brilliance and the Blackness and right on for the darkness, all of that stuff, all that brilliance gets emptied into a genealogy that only enhances that genealogy. And so when you do that, you have also bumped up against the limits and the ceilings. And if you're reaching for something beyond that, it's like reaching for a phantom limb once you had one amputated. It is something that you think you remember, that you do remember, but at least, no, I'm sorry, that's not a good analogy, because a phantom limb is something you had at one time. Amputating your memory recovery presumes that you have a memory to recover. Blackness shrinks those possibilities, at least in my mind. When you say Africa, and people say, well, Africa is not a word we created. It's absolutely not, but it does link you to, as John Clark reminds us, to land, history, and culture. Land, people, and culture. Culture being encompasses of history and memory as well. It links you to land. You're from a place, not this place. You're from this place too, but you're from a place before that place that continues to echo through you. Where is black land? No, and people say it's Kemet. Nah, it ain't the black we talking about. Don't get cute. You're talking about captivity. It links you to people. Once you say black people, that invites the nativism. Now you got confusion. Well, the Africans say they ain't black. I'm Nigerian. I ain't black. I'm Dominican. See, that black is a problem. People, I ain't no African. Yeah, you came from Africa. Yeah, but so you concede you came from Africa. Yeah. So why are you cutting your memory off when you walk up in the church and do this and go on some rosary beads and are praying for Pope Francis, as we will all hope that the man makes a recovery? He's had a coughing fit apparently last night that triggered some other stuff, but he's still, fighting, no problem, late 80s. But here's the thing. Why is that man more important than your grandmother? Because you're tied to a genealogy. So don't get them saying, I ain't black, I'm Puerto Rican, and then you rub it on some rosary beads with a man hanging from a cross around your neck and saying that guy on the wall with that little beanie on his head is more important than your grandparents. You have truncated it, and Blackness and Africa will allow you to do that. Africa makes it harder to do that. That's my short answer to me.
Okay. Also, do you have your bell?
I do.
Have your bell? All right, let's bring it. Let's bring it for Hazel Dukes, the NAACP New York powerhouse, age 92. Age 92 made transition today.
Asheo. Just saw her at the when they announced the New York Reparations Commission, and she was
still in them streets. Still in them streets. Now, I wish she wasn't standing behind Eric Adams at one time that I saw recently, but
with Reverend Daltrey, another 90-plus-year-old. But you know how old black people are. They ride with you right or wrong.
No matter what. That's the kind of loyalty, though.
It is.
I love it.
It is. Oh, Hazel Dukes.
Rest in power.
For sure. Rest in power. I love you all. And listen, y'all, Monday night, we will be in office hours. We're going to finish The Eloquence of the Scribes. Dr. Wilkinson, please. Oh, wait. Would you? This is him. This is Eugene McDaniels.
Yeah, we're going to start. Let me just say this as well, Dr. Carr. I want to thank you because genealogy, matters. When you talked about the clock and, our existence in humanity, not starting in enslavement and in bondage, it's important that we know, like, there's no Roberta Flack without this man. But this man, we don't even know who he is because they erased him. We talked last week about Hazel Scott. There's no Alicia Keys and all of this. We can't let them erase us, but we also have to be vigilant ourselves in knowing, and that genealogy matters. We don't just come into the world alone. All of this is a collection. And listen, the building on knowledge. Yes. We should never have to start from scratch.
No.
Too much has been done. Too much has been done.
Prof, I tell you, when the child asked me how do I do it, I'm going to tell you how I do it. And I'm going to tell it directly to you. Last week when you were talking about Hazel Scott, because I hadn't had a chance to watch it yet. And, we've talked about Hazel Scott before. But when I tell you the light in those kids' eyes last week, when I showed them just the clip of Hazel Scott, just the trailer, when she said, none of them knew her. And afterwards, they were like, okay, so we're going to be up all night. Because her gift was transcendent, and her politics, and the fact that this woman had disappeared. In fact, that's when I know you've had students. We both had students like this who get mad when they be like, how did nobody tell me about? So I want to thank you for that, because by bringing that to the top of our awareness, it was like, I know some of them kids lost sleep that night because they went back and watched that Hazel Scott.
But that's the job, when that woman said, I'm Hazel Scott.